Welcome everybody to today's session of Audit and Governance meeting. We are webcasting today. Please remind you to use your microphones and turn them off when not speaking. We do have some new members of the internal and external audit teams with us today. Thanks very much for joining. I'll give you a chance to introduce yourselves when your agenda item comes up. So thanks very much for being here in person. So on to the agenda. Firstly, are there any apologies, Amelia?
No, Chair, we have a full house today.
Full house, brilliant, perfect, thank you. Okay, the minutes for the meeting of 14th of December 2023 is first up. Okay, are there any comments on the minutes of the meeting, or can we approve them? Councillor Dennis.
Sorry, Chair. I know I keep going on about this, but I just don't think it's clear what was said or agreed about the markets. So, I mean, I'm happy to accept everything else in the minutes, but my understanding is that the internal audit did a report on Totnes market. We then I questioned whether that applied to all the markets. I think the answer was that the audit had been done of Totnes market. Then we had Mr. Molyneux in, who explained that there were going to be improvements made to the markets, and I questioned whether those improvements would apply to all the markets, and he agreed that in fact that was the case and they would be applied to all the markets. And I can see that it is within today's agenda. It is mentioned that it will be applied to all the markets, so that's good. So if we can just capture that in those minutes, I think, having spent a lot of time with the market holders at Kingsbridge, they've always felt that the focus has been on Totnes to the detriment of all the others. And I think on behalf of them, I'd really like it to be made clear that those improvements that have been suggested will apply across the board to Kingsbridge Market and Ivybridge Market, as well as Totnes.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Dennis. Okay, I admit to being somewhat confused about this myself, because I agree with what you said up to a point. When we asked in the meeting if the work would cover all the markets, the answer was yes, but I thought subsequently we were told that that wouldn't be the case. So that was my recollection, and maybe we could check, because I think that we are now only looking at the Totnes market. Maybe someone will check. Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, I could go and check now physically and come back and report back. Would that help?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful if that.
I don't think Mr. Molyneux's coming to the meeting, but I know he's here. So
okay, yeah, that would be very helpful. Thank you very much, because that was my recollection that the statement in the meeting was unfortunately not correct, or misunderstanding in the meeting itself. Okay, let's hold that. These, by the way, are in the supplementary pack, not in the first pack, these minutes. So let's hold this, if that's okay. Amelia, thank you. I should ask, are there any other comments about the minutes? Okay, let's move on to the next. Division of the agenda. I'm not aware of any reason to divide the agenda. Item 4, declaration of interest. Members, are there any declaration of interest on today's agenda? No. Okay, good, thank you. All right, so let's go on to item 5. Grant Thornton, the audit opinion on the 2022-23 statement of accounts. And here we welcome Mr. Murray, who will introduce and go through the report. Mr. Murray, over to you. Thanks very much for your time. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. So, as has just been described, this report sets out the findings of our audit on the Council's financial statements for the year ended 31st of March 2023. This follows on from our report at the previous committee on value for money arrangements, as our responsibilities are twofold, one in respect of value for money and one in respect of the financial statements themselves. Page 3 of the agenda pack, which is entitled Headlines within our report, we set out some of the key messages. I think the key message to get across first and foremost is my proposed audit opinion, which I hope to be able to issue later today after committee and after discussion is an unqualified opinion, which is the kind of opinion that certainly Mrs. Buckle and Mrs. Henstock would be hoping I was going to say I would be issuing. We've identified two main changes to the financial statements as part of the audit this year, both of which relate to information provided to the council by external advisors. So in one case, the council's land and building valuer, as part of our testing, we identified they'd picked up an incorrect build rate in one of their calculations. That had the impact of understating the value of a specific leisure centre asset by around 0.3 million. The council has updated the financial statements for that change, and the external valuer confirmed that they had indeed just made an error in the selection of that build rate. The other adjustment then relates to the council's pension liability on the balance sheet. Again, this was something that the actuary in the draft accounts reported a small surplus in terms of the valuation. Subsequent to the council receiving that valuation and publishing its draft accounts, the accountancy body, issued some further guidance on something that's called IFRIC 14. We asked the actuary some further questions, and they updated their valuation based on that newer guidance to move from a small surplus to a liability of just under £2.2 million. Again, the council has adjusted that item within the set of accounts that is on the agenda immediately after this. We identified a few small other disclosure type changes throughout the audit, but those were the two key changes, neither of which alter the council's reported outturn or impact on the council's usable reserves. They're both accounting entries that are reversed into unusable reserves. At the time this report was drafted, we noted that just the final senior quality review of the file was outstanding. That's now all been fully completed, and as I said, subject to today's discussion, upon receipt of the signed documents, I'll be in a position then to issue my signed opinion. Just going through some key elements of the report, I'm not going to take it page by page. Page 6 of the agenda pack sets out and reminds committee members of the materiality level that our audit was conducted to. So materiality of just over 1.1 million, and a reminder what that means is if we identified an error or an uncertainty above that level, and management didn't agree and didn't change the financial statements, I would not be sat here saying we've got an unqualified opinion. I would need to consider what that meant for my audit opinion, but we don't have any of those such matters. And the trivial level, 57,000, what that means is that's the level I'm formally required to report to you through this report, any errors or adjustments. Clearly there will be some other errors or adjustments below that level that we would have discussed with management through the audit, but under auditing standards, we're only required to report those over 57,000. The following few pages then set out the significant risks that I reported to you in our audit plan. Some of those are presumed risks that are in place at all entities, for example, management override of controls. Others are specific to you, but specific to local government more generally. So valuation of land and buildings, which I've already talked about, valuation of investment properties, which is perhaps of more interest given that can and does have an impact on the council's funds, and the valuation of the pension liability, which again we discussed. Page 11 also notes that there was a change in payroll system in this year of financial year and this year of audit. We reviewed the work that had been undertaken to move from the old system to the new system to make sure the data was transferred completely and accurately, and so that new system was producing correct information. The following pages go into quite a bit more detail on the work we've done on those key estimates and judgments. I won't go through each of those in detail, but happy to take any comments or questions. And page 16 then of the pack talks through our assessment of IT controls and IT general controls, which largely, as you can see on that page, we are saying are appropriate and there's no significant deficiencies identified through that. I'll come on to the control recommendations we make later in the report. Just a quick reminder on pages 20-21 that value for money report that I presented at the last committee did not identify any significant weaknesses in arrangements, and there were just a couple of minor improvement recommendations reflected through that. My audit opinion on the accounts will reflect that there are no significant weaknesses in value for money arrangements that have been identified. And to bring to your attention before I move into the appendices, then page 23, the other piece of work that we undertake for the council is in respect of the housing benefit subsidy return that's done on behalf of the Department for Work and Pensions. So that's a separate piece of work completed by a separate team. We're required as your external auditor to report to you that that work is undertaken for the council as well. And we set out some of the potential threats and the safeguards that we consider to be in place. That is a piece of work that is done across local government, generally by external auditors, and is allowed under the public sector audit appointments terms of reference. Just moving into the appendices then briefly. So pages 27 and 28 set out the 5 control recommendations that we've raised as a result of this year's audit. You can see there 4 low assessments, which would be best practice, and then one medium assessment. The medium assessment being in respect of cybersecurity training. So we've discussed at this committee previously around threats around cyber and cyber risks. We identified that there were some individuals who hadn't fully completed cybersecurity training. So clearly there is a risk that if individuals aren't aware of those threats, the council could be at more risk of cyber attacks. So we've made a recommendation around cybersecurity training and ensuring that attendance logs are monitored and people appropriately chased. The other 4 in-year recommendations then, one was around the retention of some councillor information. So annually there will be requests of, do you have any interests that need to be disclosed within the financial statements? During our work for this year, there was one councillor or one return that had not been provided and another that had only been partially completed. Unfortunately, despite the council chasing for that information, those councillors had left, and so that information could not be sought or obtained. And then over the page, the council's main ledger system has not been updated for some years. So again, I suppose this links a bit back to that cyber point, in that there is a risk that therefore the system is not supported by the software provider. It's on IT risk registers, but we're recommending here that that is updated to make sure the latest version is in use. Similarly, another system point around payroll reports and the fact that a change in circumstance, and what I mean by a change in circumstance is maybe someone moving from full-time to part-time, a change in hours, change in working pattern. The system couldn't produce a listing of those individuals and what those changes were to allow us to do some specific testing on those specific changes. And then the final point is a reconciliation difference between the council's main ledger system, which is what's used to produce the accounts, and then the asset register system, which holds a lot of information. There was a historical audit adjustment maybe 2 years ago now, which, when it was processed through the asset register with the support of the system provider, seems to have not pulled through into one specific report. The council have discussed that, or are discussing that with the system provider. We were satisfied that the accounts and the ledger were showing the correct number, but clearly if there's an inconsistency between the two, we would recommend that that was rectified, and so those systems should be showing the same values. Over the page 29, there were 2 recommendations in the previous year, both of which we consider to some extent still are in place, or we would re-recommend. One around journal system controls. So as external auditors, an ideal control environment would see every journal entry reviewed, authorised by a second user. Clearly there is a cost and resource implication to doing that. Our recommendation is, in an ideal world, every journal should be reviewed. Management consider this and say, given the way up between risk and resource, we do have controls. They don't see every journal being authorised, but over certain levels, journals are authorised. Management's response is included on that page. We include it here to say there is a potential risk, therefore, that either erroneous or fraudulent journals below some of those levels could go unnoticed, recognising there are some other controls in place around budget monitoring, etc. The other recommendation from the previous year was in respect of some of the information held for valuations, and specifically this tended to be floor areas, not having kind of detailed measured CAD plans, and some being some handwritten notes where a valuer may have gone out a few years ago to measure something. Best practice that there would be kind of comprehensive support for some of those floor areas. We can gain assurance from some other areas to support the numbers used in those valuations. Page 30 sets out the two adjustments I alluded to in the introduction around the pension liability and the valuation of Kingsbridge Leisure Centre. And page 31 sets out some minor disclosure points around accounting policies, audit fees, and various other typographical or disclosure and formatting changes. Finally, page 32 sets out the one area where the accounts have not been updated. This is in respect of the council's investment with the CCLA, and it's an issue that we've reported in previous years as well. In our view, this should be classified in a specific section of the council's comprehensive income and expenditure statement. Management and their treasury advisors believe that it can be disclosed elsewhere. We're not arguing about the number. We're just saying we think it should be shown in one place. Management say they think they can report it in another place. Neither the in-year nor the cumulative impact of this is material. I'll take you back to that materiality slide. So therefore, I am satisfied that even though those accounts haven't been adjusted, that does not impact my audit opinion, and I can still issue a clean audit opinion. Finally then, page 33, proposed fees, which will have been reported through the audit plan previously. They are subject to confirmation by public sector audit appointments, so they will need to go to PSAA for their consideration. They will decide whether they are appropriate or not, after which, if they say they are, we will bill it. After which they say they're not, we won't. There's no specific fees there for this council that we're not raising at every other local government audit, to give some assurance. So there's no Southam specific fee variations within that slide. I wasn't going to say anything more on the report, Chair. Appreciate I've talked for a little while there, so happy to take any comments or questions.
Well, Mr. Murray, thank you very, very much for your detailed report, and also thank you for getting it to us on time. I know there was a lot of work and effort put in by officers and the team, so that was great to hear, to see. And I think it's also excellent that we've got a clean audit report. So that is very, very good. You mentioned a couple of things I want to point out, particularly before I open it for questions. You note that we've got the proper arrangements for economy, efficiency and effectiveness, which is good to see. There are no matters arising from your audit report, and it's an unqualified audit opinion. So I think those three suggests that we're in actually very good shape in terms of auditability. So that's very nice. Perhaps I'll just open it then for questions or comments from other people, and then we'll take the motion. Yes, Councillor Rick to start with.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. It's nice to get an unqualified report. Just on the adjustment to the value of, well, that caused a small pension surplus to shift to a pension liability. IFRIC 14, by memory, came in 2006. So presumably the actuaries have been aware of it for some time. I'm just wondering, and I know it's been amended since then, do we have any, I just wonder what changed under the hood, as it were, that led to this change?
So through you, Chair, you're absolutely right. This isn't a new thing. What was new this year for a number of authorities, including Southam's, was the actuaries coming back with the annual valuation and reporting a surplus. So historically, it would have been a very, very large negative liability number. IFRIC 14 looks at if you do have a surplus, whether that surplus should be limited. So for the first time, certainly that I can remember, this was the first time I'd seen a pension surplus being reported by an actuary. So although it has been in place for a number of years, actuaries haven't necessarily needed to consider this as part of their work, whereas this year it was. I said, SIPFA, I just did a quick search there, says SIPFA released some further guidance on pension surpluses in IFRIC 14 middle of November 23, and that's what caused some further correspondence with the actuary. That clearly is a number of months, 6 months or so, after the council published those original draft accounts. So that's why that question arose and why it hadn't been asked previously.
Thank you. Can just a couple of other things on your little materiality table there with 1.14 million. I haven't got it in front of me, but 1.4 million, 1.14 million, 0.86 million, and then 57,000 from memory. So when I first read that, I thought that was 3 levels of materiality, and then I wondered if the middle one, which I don't think you touched on today, was actually a kind of part of your report, and said that. So could you just talk us quickly through are the 3 levels of materiality? Is my question.
So yeah, through you, Chair. So the top number, the biggest number, the headline materiality as it's known, that's the number as I explained. So if there was an error or an uncertainty above that number, we would require management to adjust the accounts. If they didn't, we'd be in a conversation about potential qualification. The one on the bottom of the table, the trivial level, that's a proportion of materiality, and any error or uncertainty identified, whether that's adjusted or not, that then must be reported to yourselves as those charged with governance through this report. So anything 57k or above that we've identified that needed to be changed or we think should be changed but wasn't, that is included within today's report here. The middle value is performance materiality, is something that's set out in the auditing standards, and generally the way I look at it is we test to that level because that takes into account the potential for cumulative errors to be material. So if we're sample testing, we're clearly not looking at everything. So we test to a level lower than materiality to ensure that we have overall assurance. The concept of headline materiality, that top big number, and performance materiality is what's set out in our auditing standards. And so the standards say you would have those 2 numbers. Effectively, what would this mean in practice? Any single number above that performance materiality level, we would test because it's of such significance that it could potentially lead to a material error. And we also use performance materiality in calculation of sample sizes and the like. So that's more how we specifically test, whereas the big number is materiality as a whole, and do those accounts give a true and fair view. Hopefully that answers the question.
It does very adequately, thank you. And if I may, Chair, just a third one, probably more of a comment than a question, but on the statement of the how profit or loss on the, I can never remember the acronym, but the investments. Am I correct in interpreting that you want it at fair value through profit and loss, and the management want it at fair value through OCI? Just to comment that I'm on management side on this one, so I can see and support their point of view. So that's all.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure they appreciate your support. Any further questions? I've got a couple myself, but I'll hold off for the moment. I'd like to ask Mr. Murray about the action plan, and I guess a couple of things. I'm a little surprised, or perhaps you could explain why you've classed green some of these points of action, because a couple of them seem quite important. I think the one that I highlighted is the upgrade for the financial Civica software. I mean, surely if software's back level, it's neither supported properly, bugs are not fixed, it could be attacked through cybercrime. I mean, how is that not a high or significant risk? I worry a bit.
So I think it's a fair challenge, Chair. I think in our view, this wasn't something that we reported to management and they weren't aware of it. So it's on the IT risk register. It's being actively managed as part of that process. So in my mind, management are aware of that and are taking steps to address that issue. That reduced the significance of the control recommendation. I'm also aware that upgrades were scheduled, and then because of timings of audit and then year ends, those upgrades were deferred on the basis. Mrs. Henstock, it looks like you wanted to come in on that. So again, it was a management are aware of the situation, which is why we put it at that assessment level. But I appreciate the potential risk could be quite significant.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to reassure members, it is our top priority. Once we've closed the 23-24 accounts, we will be upgrading the system. As Mr. Murray said, we had scheduled to do the upgrade in the autumn, but unfortunately with the audit as well, we couldn't manage both projects, and that was a bigger risk to us in a way than actually leaving it for a little bit longer. So well recognised, we have got mitigations in place, but we will be looking at doing that as soon as we've closed the 23-24 accounts. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's reassuring. Obviously, not everything can be done at the same time. So, okay, got a schedule working. Okay, just in terms of these actions, how are we tracking these actions now? Perhaps we could ask Lisa to comment on that, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Our recommendation would be that we add this to the audit tracker, which is also on today's agenda. So traditionally, the audit tracker has only looked at internal audit recommendations, but I think we'd like to make a recommendation that the ones that have been identified by external audit, for example, the ones in the action plan, are also added to the audit tracker. And then when we bring that back to the Audit and Governance Committee, it will have both internal audit and external audit recommendations on there, and we can track both. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Mrs. Buckle. That seems a very good suggestion to me. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that or whether we just accept it. I don't know whether we need to, should we add it to the recommendation as a separate line just so that we don't forget it? What are people's comments? Any?
Yes, definitely, and we'll add it to the recommendations anyway, I think.
Yeah,
On the valuation of the property, has there been a follow-up with the valuer? Oh, great. Well, you're nodding. That's what I want to understand, that there was follow-up to understand that we
Yes.
would require no errors next time.
Yes, we exactly that, Councillor Yardy. We've had that conversation with the external valuers. This was a piece of work which was externalised by the council to professional valuers that are RICS qualified, because we didn't have the capacity to do that piece of work in-house. We will have the same valuers for this financial year for the 23-24 accounts, and we are in the process of having some dialogue with the valuers this time around the 23-24 valuations as well, and we've been very clear about the quality that we expect from that work.
Did we suffer any reduction in value according to, let's say, rates or anything? Was there anything as a result of that valuation that we suffered a loss on?
No, it was just that it did require rework from the finance team quite a lot, so because obviously a fixed asset valuation affects many balances in the accounts, so it did incur additional time from the finance team because obviously we had to rework all of that through the accounts. So there was some notional staff time in there, yes.
I hope the valuer takes that time and reduces it from his next bill. Thanks.
Councillor Dennis.
Just as a direct follow-on to that, and presumably it also had no impact on the negotiation of the contract that was agreed last week with the providers. Bridget might know what to discuss.
The contract with the valuers, I think, was put out quite a while ago, from a good few months ago. yeah. But obviously we laid out the specifications for that work, and there has been dialogue with the councils. Oh, I see. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm not
No.
being overly clear because I wasn't
Sorry,
sure if it
that's
was
my fault.
we were allowed to discuss it now and it would be confidential. But obviously, at full council, we agreed a new contract with the leisure centre providers. So, did this valuation have any impact on that contract?
No, none at all. Sorry, Councillor Dennis.
Yeah, I think it is a concern that the valuation is by a you know, clear professional that we've chosen seems quite a bit out. But it sounds like there's not very much we can do about it in the short term, unless we find a way of checking their next valuation. I mean, is there anything you recommend we need to do in addition next time round, or we just see what happens and then keep a close watch on it in future?
Obviously, we are doing some detailed spot checks on the work that they're doing on the 23-24 valuations for us. And yes, we have had quite a lot of dialogue with the valuers. That's also involved members of the finance team as well, because our concern at the moment is getting those valuations back in time for us to be able to close the accounts by the end of May for 23-24. And there is a critical timeline, so if we don't get the valuations back in time, we won't be able to close by 31st of May, and it will slip into June. But we are hopeful that that will be kept on track. But obviously, we are reliant on an external supplier at the moment.
Okay, I mean, that seems fair. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Yardy.
Who is our IT software supplier that you will be undertaking the update with?
For the finance system, that's Civica. Yeah, so we use Civica Financials, and we will be doing the upgrade through using Civica Financials. And there is a plan to obviously move all of it to the cloud as well. So there's quite a big project there that Pauline and the team will be working on as soon as we've closed 23-24 accounts.
Okay, the reason I ask obviously is because of the revelations yesterday about what can happen behind financial systems when they don't quite work well, and it's what might appear as being a minor finding can eventually have a significant manifestation some years later. So why I was interested is because Civica, from what I understand, has a good reputation and a good quality system. So that's a nice answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Yardy. Yeah, fair point. All right. Anything else then on this audit opinion? In which case, I think let's go to the motion with the addition now that the recommendation notes the contents of the report and the actions recommended by the external auditor be added to the audit tracker. Yep, so let's just call it an audit tracker, not an internal audit tracker, because it is now internal and external. Okay, is that fair? Do I have a proposer? Okay, thank you, Councillor Nick. Seconder, yep, Councillor Oram. All right, all those in favour? Unanimous. All right, thank you very much, everybody. All right, and thank you, Mr. Murray. Really appreciate that. You're very welcome to stay. Okay. Yes, you want us to put our names on it. In fact, I think actually we've got the next item too. Audited annual statement of accounts, annual governance statement, and audited summary accounts. In fact, they're not audited summary accounts. I think there's an incorrect word there. So let's make sure we come to that. Okay, so who's going to take us through this item number 6?
Lee, I'm very happy to introduce it. I mean, much of this has been covered in the agenda item you did before, and this is really, but there are, as has been said, there are some documents that need to be signed off, so this is giving approval for that so that those documents can be signed. Can I just say, from my point of view, I'm not going to pretend that I have understand it all totally 100%, but one of the pages that I always find very interesting in the audited statements accounts, and that you'll find it on page 61 in your document or page 9 of the audited statement accounts, and that's a summary of the main variance to the budget in 22-23, and I think you can learn a lot about how things are going well or not so well within the council, and where we might improve or what we need to keep an eye on. So we do get the budget monitoring reports come every couple of months to the executive. This is the summary of the whole year, and can I just say, great work for our finance team that we're in 0.5%. The variation overall is now 0.5% of the total budget of over 10 million. So that's an excellent achievement, and thank you very much for that. Other than that, I've nothing more to say, really, Lee. And over to your committee.
Thank you very much, Julian. Well, I think we've seen this document before. I just want to say thanks to the officers again for taking on board the feedback from this committee when we looked at it first time round. I know there weren't very many big changes, but those minor tweaks I think are helpful. And also, thanks for producing the summary of accounts. So we've crossed out the word audited because I think they're not audited. They are looked at, maybe, I'm not sure. But strictly speaking, you're not.
No, can I just say, I mean, I think these are quite excellent, really. I mean, I think when people are asking questions, not the great detail, and some of us are more interested in detailed accounts than others, but this gives a really good overall view of how things are going. A bit like that I highlighted about the variations, and I know it was something you were very keen on, Lee. But again, thank you very much to Lisa and Pauline and the team for coming up with this abridged version, which is a lot less than the 200 odd pages there. So, anyway, thank you.
Julian, I don't know, should we ask officers just to mention the changes that are made, or they've already been covered really by the external auditor? Do you want to add anything else on the change between the previous version that we saw and this version that we're seeing now? And is there anything else to add?
Thank you, Chair. I think really it's just the two adjustments that Mr. Murray referred to earlier in respect of the valuation of the asset and the pension asset. So the actual surplus remains at the £57,000. It is just two notional figures that have changed. So very few changes to the summary accounts.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anyone introducing the annual governance statement?
I could do
Yeah,
that,
please.
Chair. Or unless Mr. Powell wants to do that. But essentially, this is the same annual governance statement that was presented to members in the summer with the draft accounts. So best practice says that you should issue your draft accounts and your annual governance statement at the same time. And the annual governance statement, as well as the accounts, is also audited by Grant Thornton. So they would look through what we call the AGS and see if that aligns with their understanding of the council in terms of our controls. Right at the end of the annual governance statement, we always do set out anything that we might see as risks. So that's always a section to have a look at as well at the end of the annual governance statement, or at any issues identified. But essentially, this is the same document that members would have considered. It does go through the principles. You can see there, Principle A down to Principle G. It explains the 7 core principles of governance. So that's things like how we ensure we behave with integrity, ensure openness and comprehensive stakeholder engagement, how we determine the intervention necessary to achieve our intended outcomes, and how we manage risks and performance and implement good practices in things like transparency, reporting and audit. So it's there is guidance around what goes into an annual governance statement, but very much this is a document which is drafted by members of the senior leadership team and the head of strategy, and would come from things that have happened during the year. So things that are the issues identified, that would come from things like internal audit reports, risk register, And as I say, this is something we would produce annually. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ms. Buckle. I don't know if our internal auditor wants to comment at all on the audit report for the year. I guess it's taken quite a lot of input from your side of things. I mean, if you don't wish to, then it's up to you, but okay, no problem at all. Okay, good. Are there any questions on these 4 items? As I say, we've seen most of it before, and there haven't been many changes other than the ones that have been explained. So, yes, Councillor Rake.
Just very quickly, Chair.
Yeah.
The summary accounts are those available as a nice shiny leaflet that can be handed out to residents at parish meetings and the like?
At the moment, it's electronic, but I'm sure we could ask our design team if they could get some hard copies, if members would like to take them with them to parish council meetings.
Well, I don't want to be responsible for the death of a million trees, but if it's the mood of members that would be useful, then I would certainly see some benefit to it.
Would anyone else value that? I mean, I think, yeah, two others, certainly I think I probably would, 2 or 3 others. Yep, okay, well, let's recommend that. We're not producing more than a couple of hundred at the most, I think, but I think that would be good. I wonder also, is it its own separate PDF? Because I tried to find it as a separate document and I couldn't. Yeah. Okay, maybe could you circulate the link, please, of the new version? The revised version.
Will do, Chair. It is on our website under our published accounts as a separate PDF, but of course I can circulate that link. That's not a problem as well.
Okay, that would be helpful. Thank you very much. Yeah, good, and thanks, Julian, for the feedback on that. Hopefully it does make things a bit clearer on where we are. Yeah, and save reading 145 pages. read through, read 4. Good. Okay, if there aren't any other comments, let's go to the recommendations then. So, recommended that members approve the wording of the letter of representation, which basically is a letter from us as the council to say that the proper process has been applied. The audit statement of accounts, audited statement of accounts, I should say, the annual governance statement, which is what we've just talked about, and the summary of accounts. They haven't been audited, but they have been validated that they're consistent with the audited report. So I think that's the correction there. Do I have a proposer then for this recommendation? Yep, Councillor Oram. Any seconder? Yep, Councillor Rake was slightly first. Okay, all those in favour? It's a Councillor. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, members. Good. All right, let's then go to the next item. So here we move to Nathan Coughlin from Bishop Fleming, who will introduce and go through the report. This is the audit plan for auditing the statement of accounts in the current financial year 2022-23. Thank you very much, Nathan, for being with us. Perhaps you would just introduce yourself as you're new and to the committee and just sort of explain what your company is doing, what your audit plan is and so on. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. Thank you for that. First of all, we're absolutely delighted to be appointed. So as Bishop Fleming, it's our first step into the local audit market. We're a southwest firm with roots sort of in Devon and spread it out now into sort of West Midlands, down to all the way down to the tips of Cornwall. Over 500 people, focused mainly on audit, and within our audit team, public sector team is the biggest part of the audit practice, so it's half our audit work. We have recently been appointed by the PSAA process to be auditors for about 30 local audits from 2024 year end onwards. That includes mainly district councils, so just over 20 district councils, and a few fire and police authorities. And what we've been doing as an organisation is making sure we're building up our team and experience relevant to this piece of work, ready to go. So my background, I was at PwC previously and had worked with local audits in the past. I'd also actually been the audit manager for South Hams for 1 year as well, but that was many, many years ago. And also worked with West Devon previously as well as an internal audit manager. We've supplemented that with a number of people who've got relevant experience in local audit. Your audit manager, who will be working alongside me on your appointment, will be someone that's joined us from Grant Thornton himself, who lives locally. So he's joined us as a firm that's based more locally to where he lives. And then we've built the team around that as well in terms of supporting them, training them, getting them ready for this audit process. So we have a team that's ready and raring to go, and conscious that you've only just signed off your 22-23 accounts, or about to sign off your 22-23. But here we've got for you today our 23-24 plan. And that kind of illustrates what we're trying to do, I think, with this contract, which is very much focused on trying to bring this audit timeline back into the expected timetable. So last year, you'll be well aware that I think 1% of audits were signed off on time nationally for local authorities. So only 1% hit that September deadline. So we're trying to work with management at the moment to try and bring that forward this year to get it closer to that September position. We're being very mindful and working closely with management about actually there is shared service function here in the finance team with West Devon as well. There's a number of other commitments. You've been just finishing one audit. You've obviously got year end. You've got budgets you've just done for next year, longer term range forecasts to do. Then you've obviously got to get the year end accounts ready. So there's got to be a bit of managing in there so that actually you can get on with the day job as well. But we've pulled together a timetable that suggests we'll come in to see you over the summer with a view to actually getting your external audit signed off in the autumn this year. So a good sort of 6 months-ish earlier than this year. And then next year we'll look at it again, so if we can bring it back 1 or 2 months again, so that we'll make sure we're hitting that September deadline for you. So that's where we are, big picture, and what we're trying to do timeline. The document you've got in the pack today is our initial audit plan for the year. This is very much based on our initial planning processes to date. We've had, since appointment, we've had some really good engagement from management in terms of understanding how you work, understanding some of the challenges and issues you've got coming forward. So we've had some good discussions on early technical matters as well, coming forward as well. And what we've pulled together is our initial assessment of the risks for this year's audit. Key things, I think, just to point out on this document, materiality, we've talked a little bit about, and the 3 different options in that. Our approach is exactly the same in terms of materiality. You'll see the numbers there broadly similar to what GT had used. Our benchmarks are actually the same in terms of 2% of expenditure, and then the reporting threshold will be that 5% of that overall materiality level, which again, in our rough calculations at the moment is about 60,000, which was the 57 Jackson was talking about earlier. So that'd be very consistent in terms of that approach. Similarly, the risk assessment, you'll see on the report from Grant Thornton that there's significant risk and work completed. Our first assessment of the risk areas are exactly the same. In terms of management override, we need to look at a significant risk area for all audits, and that's around management's ability to bypass control structures. So the way you could do that in financial statements is to look at any estimates and judgments in the financial statements and journals that process directly into finance systems. So in terms of estimates and judgments, again, there's some things in the Grant Thornton report. So areas look at like provisions there. So you've got some things around NDR provisions in your accounts that commented on by the previous auditors. So we'll be looking at similar areas again there. The auditing standards require us to consider whether revenue or expenditure recognition should be a significant risk. Our initial view is the same again as you would be used to, and as actually is very common in the sector for local authorities, that it's difficult to one, to have the incentive, and two, the ability to misstate revenue and expenditure through fraudulent activities with the control structures and the tone from the top that's in place. So we've at this stage rebutted those as significant risks as you'd be used to. That leaves us with the similar significant risks you've had previously around estimates and judgments on valuations. So we've talked a little bit today about both of these, land and buildings, similarly the investment property valuations, and finally the valuations of the pension scheme. So it'd be a similar kind of approach that we take. We would be reviewing the work of your experts, reviewing the inputs to that they've used, and making sure that we're comfortable with the assumptions they've used as well in that calculations. The final point in the plan that I probably should highlight then is the fee section, which so the PSA contract sets the fees through a tender process, and we flagged on there one potential variance from that around ISA 315. That's an auditing standard change that happened last year but wasn't baked into the tender process, and you'll see it's one of the items that's on Grant Thornton's list as a potential variation for last year. So there's a process to go through with PSAA to get that clarified again for this year. But happy to take any questions on the rest of the document or ourselves.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for going through that. Are there any questions that are arising from the audit plan, members? Councillor Oram shrugging his shoulder. Maybe there may be a question.
Oh, go on. Yes, thank you very much. I'm really pleased to see such a detailed timeline for the audits to take place. As you rightfully mentioned earlier on, we had some anxiety about these reports being finished on time. So I suppose what I want to ask is, how confident are you that this particular timetable can be well achieved? Yeah, I'd like to hear how confident you are about that.
Okay, I'm very confident from our side because actually we had obviously staffed up to get going on this as soon as possible, and there's been further delays and slippage, I guess, in the audit sector over the last year. So we have people chomping at the bit to go. My only concern and nervousness is that we push management a little too hard, really, in terms of actually making sure they can deliver to the timetable as well. So I think it's something we've just got to manage and make sure in this first year that it's actually delivering to a sensible timetable that doesn't disrupt the organisation too significantly.
I'm sure our management are more than capable of dealing with you. But thank you for your answer. I really appreciate you clarifying that for me.
Yeah, I think just adding to that would be useful for perhaps if you wouldn't mind coming along or joining remotely our next meeting. I think it's in July, to give us an update, and perhaps you could by then give us an exact date for issuing the audit report. Would that be helpful? I mean, is that something we would want, or is there maybe a different suggestion? I don't mind. What do you think?
Chair, at the July meeting, we certainly hope to have published the draft accounts by then and probably be well underway with the audit. We're already completing some work on the value for money side for Bishop Fleming and documenting all of our evidence. We have got a lot of that evidence from the peer review process, so that's helped us, that we've already collated a lot of that we can put into the same documents for Bishop Fleming. But yes, in terms of the timescale, like I say, we are dependent on the valuations sticking to time for the fixed assets. So as long as those come in on time, we would be looking to meet that timescale. But I think by July we'll have a very good idea about where we are with the audit and timescales that are possible.
Yeah, I'm very, very happy to come along to the next one and bring us sort of an update on the timetable, because as you say, we'll have a better idea of that, and also if there's any change in that initial risk assessment, because these are early days for us as well.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, if we can get a timetable, sooner rather than later with a fixed date, that'll be appreciated, I'm sure, by the team. But at the same time, we do want them to have a summer holiday, so yeah, is that allowed? No, Councillor Rake.
Thank you, Chair. Our glorious leader referred to external auditors as chocolate teapots recently in the press. And whilst I disagree with him fundamentally on that, it's also true that none of the high-profile councils to have got into financial difficulties, or indeed any of the private sector failures, all of those organisations had been audited prior to their difficulties. Do you have, as an industry, a view of what's gone wrong and how that can be prevented, so that we don't get? I mean, it's great to hear that you've been playing friendlies and getting match fit for taking on this task, but we don't want too many more to slip through the goalie's hands and into the net. And so, I'd just be interested to get your view on when things go wrong, why they've gone wrong.
Gosh, I'm not sure if you've got time for all of this. So there's a number of different factors that have made issues go wrong in big higher profile audits. I think from my personal view, I think there's an issue around how the scale and complexity and the rigor of audits that take the auditing standards have taken firms down to look at certain things in minutiae detail, but actually what's needed on some of these higher profile issues is actually the ability to stand back and see the bigger picture on things like going concern sign-offs. And that's been a big issue, I think, in terms of actually how they're delivered as well. So a lot of those have moved to sort of remote audits, people not necessarily understanding how it all joins together in that bigger picture. So I think as a slightly smaller firm than the ones that do listed audits, we haven't got any of the kind of track record of having significant issues like that. But what I would say is that we spend a lot of time in making sure we understand the bigger picture. We'll have people on your audit that don't just work on local authority audits. There'll be also people that have commercial experience as well. So I think that blend will work quite well in terms of actually bringing that commercial perspective. And actually, I think it will add some value in terms of some of the control recommendations we're making as well, in terms of how we've seen things done elsewhere. So without criticising any other firm and how they've done on certain things, there's a lot of transparency reports out there and you can read them all. But I think for me, those are the key things about how the audit profession's been driven to do things in certain ways.
Yeah, thank you. That is an important question for us to understand. And I guess just to pick up, if I may, on your answer, if it's a question of the audit firms being driven to do things in a certain way, how's that to be avoided? Let's not answer the big question for the sector as a whole, but in terms of this council, what are you going to be looking for to maybe mitigate against that?
So in terms of if we go back to sort of failures of audit in terms of the going concern points, again, it's about having the right people, the right level, spending the right amount of time on that. And as an organisation, it's manageable for your organisation, for us to get our hands around it, to understand your sort of financial challenges, and you pull together some really good information that we've been looking at for the value for money report work already around your sort of longer term forecasts. There's that visibility of that and a clear strategy around that, and strategy around reserves as well. So that's the area we'll focus on around going concern. The other areas, it's making sure you've got the right level of experience and review through the more detailed testing areas. So making sure that all work gets completed by somebody at the most appropriate level, and then reviewed by somebody above them. So making sure there's checks and balances are in place, really, so nothing slips through.
I wonder if does the leader want to comment at all on the quote attributed to him?
Well, I mean, it's always a pleasure to be thrown under the bus by one of your esteemed colleagues.
Yeah. Welcome to Audit and Governance.
I stand by those remarks. I mean, we're very lucky in this council that we've got such an excellent finance team, and indeed some councillors that refuse to go along with the perceived wisdom about investing hundreds of millions of pounds in commercial property. I mean, quite how those councils managed to end up owing, in some aspects, £500 million, and that wasn't picked up by an external auditor. I rest my case, quite frankly, and I would hope that we won't have those kind of issues coming up here at South Hams, because we wouldn't allow it in the first place. But my point is that, if there are problems coming up, thus far, external auditors have singularly failed to point out the problems that these councils were facing. And as such, some of them have gone to the wall. So that, I stand by those statements, and I await to be proved wrong. When a report comes to us and says, by the way, you're doing this terribly and there's a big black hole in your budget and you need to sort that out, and you need to sort it out soon, otherwise you're going to be in trouble. Because I don't think those kind of reports were going to those councils. Well, if they were, they didn't act on them.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not quite sure where to take this conversation next, but we appreciate your comments, leader. Thank you, Councillor Yardy.
Yeah,
Bring us back to.
Well, I was going to mention, well, first of all, environmental liabilities and then sustainability. So, do your activities, your audit plans cover environmental liabilities such as contaminated land, asbestos, etc.? And then secondarily, we do have a commitment to sustainability. So I'm wondering where that begins to, if at all, interact with finance, because it seems to in many places.
So in answer to the first part of the question, yes, it falls into the scope of the audit insofar as it could potentially result in, I guess, commitments, liabilities that need to be reported in financial statements, or potential issues in terms of litigation regulation. So that those areas of it were part of the scope. And in terms of the second query about how does that the reporting sort of fit into the audit, the commitments made. Guess it features in the front end of the accounts in terms of the information you're including in that and the reporting around that, and we need to be comfortable that's consistent with our understanding, and make sure we can see that logically flows from other reports and calculations you've provided as well.
I suppose that means we have to be sharp and make sure that we've got our claims and our facts and figures correct that we feed through to you. Thanks.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Any other comments on the audit plan? I didn't expect it to be such an exciting topic on our agenda, but there you go, you can never predict. Yeah, well, we are trying to depend on you, Councillor Rigg, absolutely. Okay, if there's no other comments, then let's go to the recommendation that the Audit and Governance Committee notes the contents of the report. Do I have a proposer? Yep, Councillor Oram, very quick. A second, Councillor Hancock. Okay, all those in favour? Unanimous. Okay, thank you very much for that one. All right, excellent. And yeah, Mr. Coughlin, thank you very much for coming along. We look forward to seeing you. Do you know the date of the next meeting, but out of chance, or do we need to tell you that? I think it's the 20...
it's 20... the 18th of July.
18th of July. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just for your information. Okay, good. All right, thank you. So let's then go to the internal audit, I think now. Lost my place a little bit.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, so item 8. The leader, please, will introduce and report on the internal audit plan for 2024-25, and Mr. Measures from the Devon Audit Partnership will perhaps help us with questions or other points to follow up. That's okay. Julian.
Thanks, Lee. And maybe I should qualify that the comments I made were about external auditors, not internal auditors. Yeah. Anyway, look, I'll introduce this, but I always feel that this is very much this committee's report. I mean, this lays out, and Dominic sent me an email that now we're doing it in over a 4-year period rather than just the 1 year. So what this is that they have decided on this programme, we're talking to senior officers, senior managers within the council. But if there are areas that I think as members that you feel we should be looking at, then absolutely this is your opportunity to help to craft how many days we spend looking at particular things, whether we're thinking we're spending too much doing some and not enough on others. I've had my disagreements in this committee when I was on this committee talking about why we'd be spending so much doing, I think it was around grants that we received. And that's actually because we had a statutory duty that we have to do that. So there may be reasons as to why there is so much time spent on a particular issue, but there may not be. And it's really up to you as the committee to decide whether you think there's a proportionate amount of time spent on the relevant matters that are important to you and indeed the council. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Julian. Okay, well, perhaps Nathan, you, Dominic, you might want to introduce yourself and Joe as well, and just.
My name's Dominic Majors. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Thank you. I'm Dominic Moses, one of the audit managers at Devon Audit Partnership. You would have seen my colleague Paul Middlemas for the last couple of years. Paul is taking retirement very soon, so I am taking over the role that he took. Actually, it's a role that I undertook from about 2017 through to a couple of years ago, so I know Lisa very well, and I know the audit team here. We've got you employ two auditors, Matt and Julie, and I've managed them before. If I can hand over to my colleague Jo, she'll introduce herself and she'll go through the audit plan for you.
Thank you, Chair. Jo McCormick, so I'm the Deputy Head of Devon Audit Partnership. So obviously we are a partnership. It is what we are in terms of the number of clients that we look after. So as part of my role, it's to be involved in that audit planning cycle across all our clients. Obviously we do have similar clients in local government, and what we want to ensure that when we're putting audit plans together, and I'll take you through sort of a high level sort of process for that we are looking at risks across other clients as well, because there are commonalities between those. So I'll take you through the agenda item on the audit plan. The planning process started around December time, I would say. We look at what you have in your organisation risk register, so looking at what's in there in terms of what's really important for the year ahead. Also looking at what we've done over the previous year as well. So that's really the first stage on that, really. We have like an audit universe, so it's been alluded to about our 4-year cycle. So what we'd like to look at today really is the plan for 24-25, and we've got some indicative things that we will do over the following 3 years. But what's really important at the moment is the current plan for the new year. We do have discussions with senior leadership team, directors, looking at the sort of organisational objectives in terms of the plan for the authority, and making sure that any sort of audit work that we have in the plan is in line with that. We also, as I've previously mentioned, look at the previous internal audit reviews that we've done, not just over this current year, but the last few years, and also ensure that we follow up on any high risk issues that we've identified and any limited audit reports that we've provided in the current year now. Obviously, we're professionals in what we do, so we do take into account our own knowledge and experience of the risks that face local government, and that is really sharing those thoughts and ideas from other clients as well, and partners that we look after within Devon. And obviously a collaborative approach with our external auditors as well to ensure that coverage. So that's sort of how we got to the plan, and obviously, as already mentioned, really welcome your thoughts from the committee as well before we look at agreeing the plan. Okay, in terms of coverage for the plan, it's around 426 days of coverage, and that's combined plan with South Hams and West Devon. We have broken down in Appendix 1 how that will look over the 4 years. Like I said just now, when we're looking beyond next year, then that's not set in stone at the moment in terms of the days. That's not quite reaching those number of days, because obviously we will have follow-up work, etc., from the year we're going into. In terms of the plan summary, there's a chart there on page 233 which just takes you through where we're planning to spend our time in the different directorates, which is quite useful to see how that's come about. There is obviously focus on what are the key risks in these areas. So one year we might do more within the finance area, and then another year less so. So there is a process for that. Also looking at the budgets within those areas as well, in line with what we're looking at. But what we want to ensure is that we've got good coverage across the authority, which is really important to signing off the annual governance statement. In terms of the types of reviews, it's really important that we always look at our key financial systems to ensure they're working as they need to produce the desired outcomes. So we do we'll we'll be doing some work on like payroll, creditors, the main accounting system, council tax, housing benefits, etc. We've also got some specialist ICT reviews in there as well, which are undertaken by Devon Audit Partnership IT staff. So that's really important with the high risks in terms of IT. Our work will focus on risk-based audits, so strategic risks, things that impact the whole council, and then you've got your operational risk where we might be homing in on a particular service area as per the risk register. When you look at Appendix 1, you'll see there's some indicative days in there in order to sort of come back to the total days that we provide for the service. I would say those aren't set in stone. When we start scoping the piece of work, that is when we really get down into the detail on what needs to be covered, what are the high risks in that particular review, and then we can actually firm up the number of days that we feel is required for that review. So they can go up and down depending on the level of risk and the scope when we get to that stage. Also, please bear in mind that the plan that we put to you today, it's an adaptive plan. You know, we will change that as needed throughout the year. So in Dominic's role as the audit manager for the authority, he will have regular liaison with key staff, also with with yourselves as the audit committee, to actually understand if there needs to be any changes to the plan. So new risks may emerge, or some issues that are on the plan may drop off because there may be a change in legislation, etc. So if there are any changes as we move through the year, we will update you as a committee in the update reports as we go through. It may be that 6 months into the year, there's something that comes to the forefront of your minds as a committee that you do want us to look at, and we can have those discussions and see if we can add that into the plan. So yeah, do remember that's options as we move through the year. I wasn't planning to go through each area in Appendix 1. I'm happy to take questions on that. What we've tried to show you here in this proposed plan is when we last audited it. So it's trying to show you sort of a universe of auditable areas that we've got at the moment when we last audited it, and then sort of over on the right hand side when we plan to audit again with the indicative days. Some audits are over both South Hams and West Devon, some may just relate to South Hams or West Devon, and we've shown that in Appendix 1 as well. So I'm happy to take any questions on the proposed plan.
Well, thank you very much. I think it's a good comprehensive plan, and it's encouraging to see the 4-year timeline, because that helps us understand when things are being covered if they're not being done this year, and that's a useful step. Councillor Yardy is keen to.
Right, so I noticed the number of days in 26-27 is 110 compared to 25-26, which is 60, approximately half. And then if I look at, I'll just take one, car parking, because that's my little B at the moment. It says that 23-24 TBC, meaning to be confirmed, and then the next one is in 26-27. Why is 23-24 to be confirmed? Because we're practically the end of the financial year already. And then the next, and I haven't really heard that there's been much of an assessment taking place, yet the next one will not be for 3 years. So I'm a little bit understanding, have we had one? Because it says that we've got one to be confirmed. And then the third thing is, why is it not taking place until 26-27, when, as part of our accounts, there was a unforeseen surplus, I believe, I'm trying to use the right wording, unforeseen surplus from car parking. I think it's great that we had that, but if it's unforeseen, necessarily I would like to understand why it was unforeseen and make sure that we learn the lessons from it, and it should be understood a little bit better.
Yeah, thank you. Joe, please.
Through you, Chair. Thank you. In terms of car parking, if it's there to be confirmed, we are just finalising that at the moment. What we want to do is always bring final reports to committee, not at the draft stage, unless there's been any sort of long delays. So final reports means that we've actually discussed the findings with the client and ensured that our findings are accurate reflection of the work that's been undertaken. So for that car parking report, it must be at draft stage seeing its March, and will be reported in the end of year report at the next committee. In terms of the date of when we're next doing that piece of work, obviously that is not set in stone and that can change. Once that report is confirmed, if, for example, it was a limited piece of work or any high risk issues were identified in it, then we would be looking at that prior to a few years' time. We would be looking at that in the next cycle, so we would be doing some further work on that. Until that report's come through to final, I'm not sure if that is the case, so we have to confirm that back to you on that one particularly.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I
Will
think
the
you also
reports
mentioned the numbers, Councillor. I think there's some following pages, so the numbers may not be the totals. Perhaps if that's helpful. Over to you again.
Will the reports come through to us that are currently in draft stage? Presume they will. Okay, thank you.
I presume they will. I just also perhaps could ask who's going to finish off the reports that are in progress? Is Mr. Middlemass going to finish off, or are they going to be transitioned halfway through? Thank you.
I'm happy to take that one. So Paul is not leaving us till the end of June. Obviously, we have a team of staff that work with Paul to, sorry, you have the two auditors here working with Paul to do the work. So he's still seeing that through. We've just got a really good transition with Dom taking that over slightly earlier than Paul leaving at the end of June, just to ensure that it's just a seamless transfer over. So we are end of the financial year. It's quite normal that we're finalising our audit work for the current year in April, which we will continue to do. And then obviously the end of year report will give a summary of all the work we've done across the year, and all the work for the current year will be completed at that stage.
Councillor Yardy, any further comments? Okay, any? Yes, Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. Just on your little pie chart there, which I have now lost, it'll be back in front of me very quickly. There we are. The section called audit management, is that essentially like the overhead of this process?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, and that's a very good question. So in terms of what that involves, there is a bit of narrative on the following page that talks about sort of other essential activity. So that management is sort of the time for Dominic to manage the plan and to review the work that is carried out by the two auditors employed by South Hams. So as a manager, sort of leading on those pieces of work, supervising the staff, ensuring that that scope is fit for purpose, and doing a quality check on the review on the work that's taken place, and helping in that sort of client debrief sessions and getting it through to final stage. Also providing that support to the auditors in terms of ensuring that knowledge is where it needs to be. Obviously, what's really positive for South Hams is that the two auditors working are directly working for South Hams, so they do have lots of direct knowledge on South Hams, but it's also ensuring they keep up to breast with sort of wider issues that happen across district councils and keeping up to date with those sort of current themes really. And we do that by involving the two auditors widely more in sort of what we class as like a districts team within Devon Audit Partnership, to ensure they're hearing about common issues that are happening at other clients and they can see if that's relevant for South Hams. Obviously, there's time in there for producing the internal audit plan, that monitoring of that throughout the year, attendance at audit committee and update reports as we go through, liaison with key staff, which happens very regularly with Lisa, liaison with external auditors that we would need to do, and obviously any sort of corporate governance and strategic issues that we may need to be involved in as we go through the year. So that can be advice, that sort of critical friend, that challenge that you might need on certain things as we go through the year, that would all sort of come under that activity. We put an indicative days in there. If we don't use them all, it may be that we spend more of that time on any audit work, and we will see how that's working through as we go through the year, because we have a time management system to monitor that.
Thank you. So, I mean, to summarise, yes, it is the overhead. Essentially, it's not, which is fine. I understand. The other thing, you were kind enough to explain that, I mean, obviously the size of these pie segments will swell and shrink from year to year. I mean, I'm struck that Place and Enterprise looks comparatively tiddly when it's the second biggest line, whatever they're called, division, directorate, department, in terms of expenditure. Is that? I haven't. I have to confess, I haven't done the homework sufficiently to do the pie chart for 25-26 to see how much that changes. But is that just a sort of, because it's a snapshot, it looks small?
I think that's a very good question in terms of how that looks split between the different areas, and we do get asked that a lot as a clients as well in terms of that. But because what we're focusing on is risk, so we want to ensure we're risk-based auditing. So at this current time for the current year ahead, we've identified higher risks in other areas, hence why that's a lower proportion for that particular area. It may be that the following year we would do more work in that area because we've done less in the current year. So it's always kind of keeping that at the forefront of our minds to think, right, we won't just split it evenly across different directorates in line with budget, because actually we want to ensure we're looking at sort of the higher risks of the authority rather than sort of looking at those lower level ones on a frequent basis. So without going through and adding up what we're doing in the further years, we always try and ensure we do have that coverage, but in line with risk, and that's the balance that we try to achieve.
I think if I can add to this general point, we'll see further on in the agenda today the budget split in detail. And yes, there is a big spend on waste in particular and recycling. And I wonder if, in fact, the internal audit work on that area is a little bit sparse, given its high spending and the fact that the systems and the processes and the people are new to the council. And I just wonder what other members think, whether we should maybe ask for an increase in the regularity of work on that. Councillor Hancock.
Thank you. Yeah, I was about to ask the same question. So I tend to.
Perfect.
I tend
to.
to.
What's the answer then?
Well, I would agree. Yeah. I mean, I think your suggestion sounds prudent, but I'd like to hear a sort of rationale for that. It appears to be the frequency of the audit for the waste, which is helpfully in red in the report and noted as medium risk, is more infrequent than other areas that are also noted as medium risk and in the dangerous red colour. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the rationale for that sort of being sparse, as you said, Chair.
We've just undertaken a piece of work because the service came back in-house fairly recently and it was high risk. We've actually done a piece of work in this audit year that is just about to be reported. I think it's just about to be reported on. So therefore, depending on what, as my colleague has said, it depends on if that comes out as limited assurance, then we'll do a follow-up next year. But if it comes out reasonable, then we'll leave it for a while. And therefore, that's why I think it's a couple of years' time. But if things go wrong or you feel that there's good reason for us to look at it again, then we will do so and we can amend that plan.
So wait and see for that report then, I guess, and then we can make a decision.
Yeah, possibly. Councillor Dennis?
Thank you. Just a few points, I guess. I'm pleased to see commercial waste in that plan, having it not been looked at for some time, and now obviously a lot more work going into that. Also really pleased to see the elections, electoral registration, as I think I brought that up at a previous meeting, so that's great. You can perhaps help me with this, Chair, but I know there was at the last Salcombe Harbour Board and the workshop that occurred before that as well, there was some questioning over the need or the potential duplication of effort when it comes to auditing the Harbour Board. Certainly the Harbour Board members felt that the auditing of the sort of the accounts side of it, or the processes, obviously benefited from yourselves looking at it, but when it came to the Marine Safety Code, that was audited elsewhere, and perhaps the Devon Audit Partnership weren't specialists in that particular arena. So myself and Councillor Bonham promised that we would bring that up today.
Yeah, we try to avoid auditing areas where it's really specialist, where there is things like health and safety. We're not health and safety, experts. So the head of audit partnership doesn't want to be held up in court and say, so why do you think you're an expert on health and safety? So we'll look to ensure that processes are in place or policies are in place, but we'll probably won't comment on whether they're, how robust they are. That's for our health and the same with things around the harbour board. We'll look at things, we've got a particular audit programme that we run at the harbour for the harbours, but it's probably, there might be a little bit of duplication, but we certainly don't profess to be experts in certain maritime law or regulation or things like that.
Yeah, if I could just, thanks, Councillor Dennis. I think just to explain a bit more detail, the report that we saw in the Harbour Board listed 5 areas where internal audit was working in the harbour. One of them was on marine safety. I think we're quite comfortable, the Harbour Board were comfortable that the other 4 were not duplication. It was a marine safety line that we were surprised that was being handled, because it was also being handled by a separate group on the Harbour Board. So I think maybe if someone could take an action, I don't know who it would be, whether it be internal audit, probably, to just see if you're actually doing anything that's that's different to the work that the Harbour Board is already doing on that particular area.
Yeah, I would take that point on board, Chair.
Was that it, Councillor Dennis? I think so.
Yeah, it was a duplication of effort, not only on your own part, but on taking up the staff resource of the harbour staff there, and the amount of time it takes up. So it was just a concern. I did have another point, if that's okay, Chair. It was just a question really about, and I know this is a personal bugbear of mine, as those of you over in scrutiny will know, but so we've talked a lot about sort of outside bodies and partners and the reporting procedure of those, and I wondered if that falls into any of the areas that you currently look at, and whether it could be looked at, the processes behind that.
I note in the plan for not this coming year, but the year after, we've got management of partnerships in there. It is one piece of work that we've done at other clients, and we basically asked the first question asked is, have you got a list of partnerships or outside bodies that you are involved in? Some of our clients are able to give us a document, others are kind of, well, we'll give you a document when we've just produced, when we've produced it. So we are interested in that area because there is risks, there's liability risks, etc., etc. So certainly it's in the plan, not necessarily for management of partnerships, which the scope can include outside bodies as well, because there's the flexibility there, but it's not for next year, it's in for 25-26. Again, if they feel a need, then we can discuss putting it into next year and taking something out and moving audits around a little.
Yeah, Councillor Nix.
Yes, going on from the point from Councillor Dennis, we had a conversation about it earlier. I'd quite like that to be brought forward and into a maybe next year. It's something we've been commenting on for the last year. So that would be, I don't know how we go about that. Is that just amending the work plan, or?
Well, I think what we're probably going to head towards is to ask the internal audit team just to have another look at the work plan, and as part of that, so I'm thinking that we'll make an amendment here and include that line plus maybe some others. So yeah, thank you, Councillor Oram, I think.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to speak in support of that, to bring that particular piece of work forward. There's been a lot of conversation over the past few months about knowing where we are with other outside organisations and what our relationship is with them on paper. So I would just like to support that, and if we can have an amendment for that for the committee to consider, I'd really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's let's add. Maybe I can just sort of suggest the proposed be approved, and this new line that says and internal audit to review their work plan, and bear with me, to look at the areas of high risk, so the ones outlined in red, because I think there's there's quite a few in red here that seem to be done every 2 or 3 years, and I think I'd ask the internal audit team just to check whether they need to be done more often, and to consider adding or consider increasing the frequency of the areas of high risk. Sorry, the word address perhaps was wrong. To review their work plan and to consider increasing the frequency. Secondly, to add partnerships area. The management of partnerships.
Management of partnerships, yeah.
Management of partnerships. And thirdly, to check the overlap with the Sorghum Harbour Board. Is there anything else that we might want to add or change? I do have one or two other thoughts myself. Councillor Rake.
Can I'd just like to point, I mean, I'm not against any of this, but we've largely just added things there without taking anything away. Is the intention that the internal audit team will come back to us with a proposed reshuffled deck, including the subtractions? Because we are, unless we increase their workload, we can't. We need to have counterbalancing areas that we remove.
Yeah, Councillor Nix.
Yeah, I think we agree that obviously we can't give them. We don't want to give them extra work. We just need to readdress the priorities. And what we're suggesting is these things are of a higher priority to us than others. So perhaps if you can come back to us with an amended work plan, that would be great.
Yeah, and I would say, if you consider it and you don't agree with these recommendations and you think it's fine as it is, let us know. But, based on the information, the fact these are high, the fact that the waste is a high budget area, our feeling is maybe it needs a bit of a tweak. But if you feel that all the other things are of more importance, then, that's something we want to hear. So it's not a decision for us, it's just a request that you check that you've got a good balance. Is that fair? I think also I'd like to ask, sorry, I have to go find my notes, whether some things are, wrong page, whether some things are perhaps missed, and there seems to be, the points in red. I wanted to raise a question of emergency planning and pandemic readiness. Is that something that you cover? Because I would have thought that would be quite a high risk area, given where we are and have been. Is that something you look at?
Yes, Chair, it is an area. It comes under the umbrella of things like business continuity plans and business continuity strategy. Pandemic is just one of many scenarios that can hit local authorities, South Hams, local authorities in general, Devon, the whole country. Pandemic was the whole country. But it could be a particular scenario that is particular to Fullerton House, or just a local thing. So it would come under our review of business continuity planning. As to where that appears on the plan, I need to say.
Sorry, Chairman, it's on page 237. I think there are 10 days scheduled in for 24-25 to look at business continuity and emergency planning. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I mean, so long as it's included there, I'll leave it to you to decide how to flag it, but I think that is important. What we heard also a little bit about the need for the council to maintain not only its staff but its talent. I see you've got staff retention. Do you also look at talent management and progression in what you do there?
That is, it can be included in the scope of recruitment and retention. It's just another facet to it. It's another element that can be added on. So that's certainly not a problem. Can be added in if need be. Just increases the scope.
Councillor Dennis?
I think in particular it was in regard to succession planning as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I think given the high skills amongst some of the senior team, we want to make sure that we don't lose them and we've got other talent being developed. So I think that would be good to add. And the last point was, I think you might have it, was brought up in the peer review, which was about communication by the council. I see you've got communication and social media and so on. What do you cover there?
That was a piece of work that actually has been undertaken this year. Personally, I don't know what that programme covered, but I can certainly find out for you and report back. But it's looking at the use of social media, because it's the way of communicating, use of websites, whether there's policies in place and whether people are following those policies.
Okay, I mean, maybe we'll wait until we see the report, but I think the peer review raised different issues more strategically about the communication effectiveness of the council rather than the policies in place. Yeah. Mr. Powell?
No, I think you're exactly right, Chair. I think that this is about the processes and the systems we've got in place. It's not about strategic communication. So if members wanted to look at that, it might be another option to add to the list. If something else can be taken off, obviously.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll wait. I mean, okay, let's not make their job too hard all in one go. Okay, all right. So, good. Anything else to add then, or to change? Yes, Councillor Dennis.
Sorry, I'm just aware that there's going to be some consideration of taking things off. So I guess one thing I would be keen not to take off is the culture and ethics, as that was last audited in 2016. And there's been some conversation about assurance maps being prepared or looked at and considered. So just to make sure that does stay in for 24-25.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's a fair point. Okay. Let's move on. Councillor Hancock's feeling it. The internal audit plan, and let's just go through these words. An internal audit to review their work plan and consider increasing the areas of frequency of high risk. Does that make sense? I'm not quite sure. It was probably my dictation.
Frequency of high risk areas.
To consider increasing the. You're better. Go on. Go with the frequency of high risk areas and managing, and to include management of partnerships, and check with any overlap with the Salcombe Harbour Board.
Yes.
So if we can take out the overlap of work with Salcombe Harbour Board, that will free up the internal audit to do half a dozen more other things. Perfect. I think we've got the solution there in one. Okay, who would like to propose this? Oh, don't be so quick. Councillor Yardy. All right, and seconded by Councillor Nix. All right, good. All those in favour? Oh my goodness.
Wow.
They must be more contentious one day. Okay, thank you very much, team. That's really good, and appreciate you stepping in for Mr. Middlemass and taking things forward. We look forward to seeing you at our next one. So next time we'll have the feedback from the full year. Is that right? Okay, great. Okay, thank you. All right. Let's have a look then at the internal audit tracker. Well, in fact, we're still talking about internal audit. No? Are we? Internal audit. The update on the internal audit plan. Councillor Brazil, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. Yeah, very much like the last one. I mean, this is your report to go through. I mean, you'll see that the update is pretty positive. The one area of limited assurance, I think it is the Totnes markets. I always find it's just on the Totnes markets. I mean, this is the goose that lays the golden egg, and I very much hope we don't try and sanitise it too much that it become that we ruin it. That's all I would say about the Totnes market. You know, markets are places of ducking, diving, weaving, and bobbing. Know what I mean? All that. And I think, you know, one messes around with that at your peril. So I appreciate that there may be some legal aspects that we need to look at, and absolutely right. But I hope that you know that in the end, the outcome of the Totnes market is the most successful market that we have in the South Hams. It draws hundreds and thousands of people into Totnes on a Friday and a Saturday. If only we could replicate that in our other towns. So yeah, and I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Julian. I don't know if Joe would like to comment on this at all, or please.
Yeah, I'll just outline some of the points. Yeah, we're still in a position to be able to announce, hopefully in July meeting, that overall opinion, reasonable assurance, based on the work that your two auditors, Matt and Julie, have been doing. And they continue to work hard to get as much of that plan across the line as possible. I know they've only got a couple more days to the end of March, but the thing is with audit plans, we start audits in March. They don't miraculously finish on the 31st of March. They will continue on into April, but we're hoping to have mopped up all the work in time for the end of year report that will come to the July committee. As Councillor Brazil has mentioned, recent audit report giving limited assurance what's on the Totnes market, and yeah, it would. We don't want to be putting red tape where red tape's not necessary, but we need to ensure that both traders and officers are, their integrity and they're protected from allegation, etc., etc. So some of the issues, it's like making sure that insurance is checked, making sure that people have got the right parties have got the right level of insurance, like public liability, etc. The collection of rents, just doing spot checks. Don't have to go in necessarily, with all guns blazing, but just doing, kind of softly soft checks just to make sure that everything is working and everybody is protected. Yeah, it's checking actual trader attendance, and it ties up with the income, the money that the council is receiving. So it's hope. We've spoken to the officers involved. They seem to agree with the findings that we've come up and the recommendations that we've come up with. A future follow-up review will be undertaken as it's limited assurance. So we will revisit it during the course of the forthcoming 12 months, and it would be it's hoped that the recommendations will have been implemented and improvements actually put in place. One thing that report, the progress report, also mentions is about the recommendation tracker, and it's already been mentioned, I think, at the meeting at the moment, with including external audits recommendations into that, and obviously that's covered in the next item. The appendix 1 provides you with a summary of the reports that have been issued as final since your last committee meeting. I think we're back in December. So there was, I think, something like 8 reasonable assurance reports issued, 7 or 8, and I'm happy to try and answer any questions that you have maybe on those.
Yeah, thank you, Dominic. I mean, again, I think it's pleasing to see so many positive, reasonable and substantial assurance lines, and only one limited assurance item. I think just in terms of presentation, and to go back to a point made earlier, it might be helpful to see where work is in progress and not yet final, so that we can actually see what we're going to be seeing in the next final report. That would be useful. Maybe just in the just to work on this, could we understand what's going on with the markets, Mr. Powell? That would be helpful, and help us understand. It seems we don't mind a bit of ducking and diving, but not too much.
Certainly, Chair. Well, I've I've managed to extract the answer from Mr. Molyneux, so please don't shoot the messenger. No, I think it's a composite position of Councillor Dennis's view and your view, Chair. Basically, the situation is that the work that's been undertaken that Dominic's outlined is consultation with the traders at the Totnes market about what will work for them in the future, taking on board the leaders' views around not making it too burdensome, but having those, being able to book stalls in advance, pay electronically, those sort of things. Once that's been agreed, that will be implemented at Totnes with a view to rolling that out to the other markets. So that's the present situation, really, Chair. That's helpful. So maybe the minutes can be amended to confirm that view retrospectively.
Okay, thank you. All right, well that is helpful. Yeah, Dominic, please.
Just in answer to your question about seeing what's going on at the moment, if I can draw your attention to page 269, there we outline audits that are currently, or at the time of writing this report, we're at draft report stage, i.e. the draft report had been issued and we're waiting for responses. The field work that was undertaken, so we had 4 audits at the time of writing this report that were field work was being undertaken, i.e. the audits were being carried out. And then we've got a number of audits where they were being planned to be started during March, and I can confirm that some of those business rates, council tax, certainly been started. And we've got a few audits that have been deferred or pushed over into next month. Again, it's hoped, apart from culture and ethics, which has actually been deferred into 24-25 plan, the others there, we hope will be finalised and will be reporting at the end of the year report.
Yeah, that is helpful. Thank you. I didn't see that as part of the whole report, but that is good. Okay, so let's go to the minutes in a minute, and we'll try and work out what to say. And we'll leave it to Amelia to work out what to say in the minutes. But that is quite helpful. I mean, how are we actually going in terms of implementing those changes? Then, perhaps, do we know that in the Totnes market? Because that is, if it's the only one with limited assurance, we should be informed of that, perhaps.
Well, I think Dominic outlined that they've already done a further audit, which is going to come forward with a reasonable assurance. So I think the changes that were resulting in it being limited have been put in place. It's now the extra changes and the consultation with the stall holders about future changes. I think that's the situation as I understand it, Chair.
Yeah, we will be doing we haven't done a follow-up at the moment, but we plan to do a follow-up in the coming month.
Okay, good. All right. Let's see if there are any other comments on this whole piece of work. I mean, I think it seems good. There's some things that seem like they've slipped a little bit, or the start has been delayed. Any questions on any of that, Councillor Dennis, and then Councillor Yardy?
So it's just on page 256 about the debt management. You've got the council tax and the business rates listed, and then you're told what the annual amount is. So you can obviously see it as a percentage. I just wonder what the annual amount of car parking fines is to understand whether 45,000 is a lot or a little of the whole, and the same with the Dartmouth ferry.
That's a very good question. I think the annual fines is around about 200,000 from memory.
Slightly less, yeah.
Yeah, maybe around 190,000. Yeah, slightly less. That could be a timing issue, but yeah, we could certainly look at that, Councillor Dennis, and give a bit of an update on that. In terms of the Dartmouth ferry, the income's over £1 million a year, so that would be quite a small proportion.
How do you incur the debt on the ferry? Don't you, if you're on it, surely you pay, or?
I'd have to have a look, I must admit. Whether that's to do with some internal invoices, I'm not sure. Do you know? No. We'll have to have a look at that for you and give a written response to the committee. Yes. Yeah, it's a good point. It's a small amount.
People getting on without having change in their pockets or something, I don't know. Councillor Yardy.
I just note that two key items are the household waste and recycling and the car parking are yet to be commenced, but I'm sure that they'll be undertaken in the next month. I just would like to make sure that they're comprehensive and cover a, how can I put it, extended period of time. So we've got a robust, fit for purpose audit, and we understand what the key issues are rather than, yeah, it's working. I'd like to make sure it's just reported and done in a thorough way, which I'm sure it would be.
Yeah, fair point. I mean, I think we're keen to see those reports in the next meeting as well, aren't we? They're being quite important topics.
Because it's obviously not at draft stage, which I think was implied earlier on. It strikes me that this has got to be started, and at this stage they're not. And I know you're leaving in June, so I think it's... No, it's not. Who's leaving? Sorry, I misheard that. Oh God!
He's just started. He's not. Hopefully, he's not leaving.
Sorry, that sounded really bad. I do apologise.
Try and be kind. Try and be kind to him in the first meeting.
I don't know where I got the June bit from.
No, that's Paul. Paul is leaving in June. I might be leaving in June, but I don't know which June. No, with the car parks and the household waste, as far as I understand, that work is being undertaken at the present time, which will lead to a draft report. And I hope that we'll be able to include the findings and the recommendations in the end of year report that will come to next committee.
Yeah, thanks. My question is about the reasonable assurance on cyber governance, and I think it's also a general point because we seem to have a high management action here in cyber security and governance, and possibly some other areas as well. You know, we've got in homelessness, we've got expenditure doubling each year. That's not really a great position to be in. Our debt is increasing. There's 2 or 3 of these areas that you've given reasonable assurance to that where the narrative is quite worrying, actually. I'm wondering, are you being a bit kind to the council in some of these cases, or am I being a bit pessimistic?
Our coverage is to look at the processes in place, and we feel we can give reasonable assurances to the process. The costs have gone up because the costs have gone up, and therefore, from an internal audit point of view, it doesn't matter what process you put in place. What you could say, well, is there alternatives to, you know, using B&Bs and hotels and so forth? But as far as actually dealing with homelessness, I would say that we feel that the processes are of a reasonable standard.
Okay, well, maybe then it's a question more to officers or the lead member to sort of understand, are we actually putting in the right policies and frameworks to help people who are homeless at a manageable cost for the council, you know, in relation to their, you know, addressing their needs. Also on cybersecurity, why are we not fixing a high action? I mean, I know it's going to be taken at a later point in the tracking, but if you have a comment now, that would be good.
Yeah, well, I can certainly comment on the cyber security. So, you know, it's recognised that that is an ever-increasing risk. You know, Mike Ward, as the head of IT, goes to, and he came back yesterday from a conversation around risk around elections, for example. So it's something very much, at the moment, it's on the strategic risk register as one of the highest priorities, which reflects the way it's considered by officers and obviously by members. We have, as part of our business continuity emergency planning and cyber risk meetings, we are looking at getting in undertaking a externally objective test of our systems. We do annual testing, but we are going to be doing a sort of a desktop exercise to see what our response would be to a cyber attack and how we could recover. We've got plans to bring different services back on board. We are also looking at moving more and more of our software into the cloud, which is part of our plan, which I think has been shared with members. So it is a question of managing that risk the best we can, but it changes by the day. So I think, as Dominic said, that will be, have we got the systems in place? Yes, we have. Are we managing the risk? Is it still a high risk or is it still a medium risk? It is. I think that's a matter of fact. And we have choices to make. We could invest lots of money into having a retained cyber expert. A company would come in upon an incident. We are looking at that as an option. Quite expensive, but it may be a decision to be made in the future. So I think that's what I'd say about cyber risk, Chair. I don't know if Lisa can pick up on homelessness, but I think with that, it's more a question with homelessness. Initial response from me is that we've got a number of interventions that are being put in place through the housing team to make sure that we're managing that risk as well as we can. But they are going up because demand's going up. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, and through reports that go through to the executive, that does set out the council's housing strategy and how we are tackling homelessness, particularly around things like early prevention. So making sure that we liaise with clients at a very early stage to, if we can, prevent that homelessness situation happening in the first place, whether that's trying to sort of, repair relationships at home, to do some early prevention work around that. And that's obviously one of our key themes within the council plan, is around housing. In terms of debt management, there is going to be a report coming back to the executive in the summer, and that will look at things like council tax, business rates, sundry debt, all the areas of debt brought together, because I think that was a previous recommendation from this committee. We have done a service review around revenues and benefits, and some of the actions coming out of that will help address some of those areas. So that is about having more inspectors on the ground, looking at things like business rates. So not only looking at inspections, but things like where there have been changes, where some businesses may not be rated through the valuation office. And again, there was a debt policy which was brought by the head of revenues and benefits to the executive. That was approved, and that sets out our processes for around debt collection. Obviously, coming out of the pandemic as well, there was a period where we weren't, for example, doing court action, because there was a period where during the pandemic, we were sympathetic to people's individual situations, as many councils were, and we put processes in place whereby we encourage people to contact us at an early stage and do things like benefits checks. So making sure people are getting all the benefits they're entitled to, doing other things like and looking at the council tax support scheme. So actually, were they eligible for council tax support? So looking at all the ways that we could help our customers and our residents with, if they were getting into arrears for council tax and business rates. So very much a sort of proactive approach as well. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm sorry to drag on this point a bit, but we've had a change, haven't we, with business rates, and the way that that's going to apply to second homes. And I wonder whether was that factored in here, or how are we handling the debt there? Because I think there were some questions raised by other members about whether we're actually going to be on top of the change and the debt collection process for people who are in different categories now.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So that change will come in from the 1st of April 2025. We are doing some work with East Devon District Council, because they also have a high level of second homes, to see what we can do to make sure that the people that are due to pay the extra premium do actually pay it, and there aren't any ways of circumventing that loop. Also working very closely with the valuation office around that. And also doing a lot of work ourselves around our council tax database to ensure that we have, we know where all these properties are that will be eligible for the second homes premium. There is a consultation which has come out from government as well, which we're waiting for the results of, because there will be some exemptions to the second homes premium. For example, where a property is in probate for a period of time, that may be an exemption to the second homes premium. We don't know yet until the legislation's been passed. But yes, that's something we're very much working on, because that will come into place on 1st of April 25. So that's all part of the head and revenues and benefits. It's all part of their action plan for this year around that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Councillor Dennis.
Sorry, my laptop's just died, so I'm going to have to try and remember this. But there's a section on commercial properties, and it refers to peppercorn rents, and it says we no longer issue invoices. I mean, I think no longer probably applies to at least a decade, but is there not a danger with not collecting those peppercorn rents that ultimately the tenants can claim squatters' rights?
We did take legal advice on that before we no longer issued those invoices for those peppercorn rents. We don't think there is a risk there, but very happy to double check that with the legal team. We can give a written response to the committee. Just also wanted to feedback on Councillor Dennis's point about the Dartmouth Lower Ferry. We've just checked with the team. Some businesses do have an account with us through which they get a pass for the Dartmouth Lower Ferry. So those small level arrears of just over 3,000 was businesses have got an account with us for the ferry. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I would appreciate it if I think it would be worth looking into just rechecking that, because I suspect there are places where peppercorn rent hasn't been collected for longer than the period already. So I think it would be worth looking at that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dennis. Thank you for the answers on that. Are there any more comments on this line? Councillor Yardy, do you want to make any amendment with regard to expediting the two areas that you have a strong view about? I mean, it's up to you. I don't want to make work. Okay, all right. You're happy with your answer. Okay. Yeah, good. Thank you. All right, so let's just move the motion then. We are recommending. Are we noting the progress made, Amelia? I'm not quite sure.
Yes, yeah, it says rising are noted and approved.
Are noted and approved. Oh, it's just the sentence is the wrong way around. We're noting and approved progress made against the internal audit plan and key issues arising. Thank you. I'll propose a motion. Any seconder? Oh, Councillor Nix was first. All those in favour? All right, thank you very much. Okay, good. Item 10. Item 10, the internal audit tracker. Yeah, we look to our leader again to present the internal audit tracker.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. And I think that, I mean, it's a very important report, this, because it's all very well being told that things aren't working and what we might do to mitigate it. And this is seeing, well, are we actually doing that? So I think that this report is encouraging. We're definitely, addressing many of the issues that there are there. What you'll see in the report is what is highlighted is areas where we haven't actually completed the task, and they are what we would term high risk. I think it's high risk, high priority. Now, there may be, again, some may feel that some are less important than others, but if there is something within this committee that really stands out to you and you feel it's something that we as a council should put more effort in trying to resolve ASAP, then I think that would be an important guide from this committee. I again, when I was on this committee, I was always concerned about our asset management, both our grounds and property maintenance. you'll see that we haven't completed those yet. And I think that we should be doing that as a matter of urgency. I know it's something that the senior leadership team are looking at and trying to resolve as soon as they can. Yeah, so anyway, I'll leave it with you there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. Okay, I tend to agree that it's an important report, and it's much more clear now to us if actions are being taken. And in general, I think the figures look positive. Are there any comments or questions on this from councillors? Councillor Dennis.
Yeah, so obviously it looks like lots of progress is being made, which is great. However, I do note that it says in terms of the category complete, action complete as agreed or closed due to no longer being required. And then referring back to the 2.3, obviously who actually is deciding that it's no longer being required. So I think at the moment the audit tracker and progress is carried out by the council's performance board, and I wonder if it would be helpful if the internal auditor was actually part of that decision.
Yeah, that's a good, interesting suggestion. I don't know if internal audit team want to comment on that idea or give their views as to whether it's feasible. And
that suggestion has been made, and I've mentioned it in another forum that I would welcome the chance to sit in on that. The review of the tracker, just to confirm, where it said that a recommendation perhaps is out of date for whatever reason. Systems have changed, the environment has changed. I just want to be there just to advise whether I think that, yeah, I agree, or maybe it should still be there. And I think that's been taken on board. And then Mr. Hawke, who's not here, but he's agreed that it's worthwhile me being part of that.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. I think the original terms of reference included attendance of internal audit when we were reviewing that part. Obviously, we cover a lot of other business, but for that part, that would actually make sense. Yeah, no problem at all with that.
Okay, good. That sounds excellent. I think that will just add another layer of reassurance that good decisions were being made. Okay, Councillor Ray, please.
Thanks, Chair. I was just looking at 2.8.1, which is on page 273 of the agenda pack. And this item, 2.8.1, which is about procuring agricultural consultants' reports for planning. I think this speaks to a broader point about, and I don't know quite where we sit on it, but about a level of pragmatism. I mean, I think that it feels very audity as an issue, in that as my understanding is that we get our agricultural consultants' reports from essentially a single consultant by force majeure. They don't run around the streets, these people. They drive around in posh cars. On the fruits of their ill-gotten gains from South Thames District Council. No, but I mean, ultimately, it isn't a very deep market, as the update says, and it feels a bit unfortunate that this has been hanging around since 2022. I suspect that we're unlikely to find a significantly cheaper consultant elsewhere. I think it would be nice to have others. It would be nice to use others, just to get alternative, different input, and also from a sanitary point of view, like a bit like succession planning, having someone else in the pipeline. But it feels like to have this hanging around as a high priority item for 2 years just feels like, yeah.
Okay.
I think there's
a
degree of pragmatism that could be introduced on certain ones of these.
Yeah, I mean that is a fair general point. I don't know if you want to comment, Mr. Power.
I share Councillor Regg's view of the world when it comes to this particular situation. There isn't a glut of people out there. We get a good service, they've got good local knowledge. And you also have to remember that there are occasions where the applicant has to have a separate view to compare to the view that we get from the consultant. So hence why it's probably been hanging around for a couple of years. It's probably the truth of the matter. But obviously the audit recommended we do need to test the market. So at some point we will need to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, I suspect this is a grey area where the balance of cost and risk need to be weighed up, and time and effort needs to be factored in, and there'll be several like this, I imagine. Okay, we take your recommendation as a good idea.
Sorry, I wasn't aware that I'd recommended anything, but good. I'm glad.
Are there any other points on this? What about the question of asset management? Well, just to remind myself, because I didn't notice this, is this still an issue of concern? Julian, is this still not resolved fully?
It was highlighted a few years back, and as far as the track has gone, it still hasn't been completed. I mean, what I should say, and I think we should bear in mind, is that the head of assets is no longer with us. We're in the process of employing a new head of assets, and I think there is going to be sort of wholesale changes within that area. But I think it's something that we should be very aware of. In any corporation or organisation, your asset management is absolutely crucial. When it works well, it's great. When it doesn't, and I've seen it when many years ago on Salcombe Harbour, we had massive problems there. Every time something broke, we had to rush around trying to find some money. Now we've got a very good asset management plan. We put money aside in reserve so that when we do, as we do here with our replacement vehicle reserve. So I just think it's a really, really important factor, and is the sign of a healthy organisation. So that's why I've always been particularly up on it. I appreciate there are things going on at the moment, but it's one of those ones that I think it's a high priority. It's also carries a certain high risk about it as well. If something fell down, or anyway. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, okay, well, maybe it's something we just bear in mind for when the new system and process team is in place, that we should just watch out for, ask internal audit to take a look at the appropriate time. Thank you, Julian. All right, any other comments? If not, then let's move the motion that the Audit Governance Committee note the progress update against implementation of internal audit recommendations as set out in the report. Any proposer? Yep, Councillor Oram, seconder Councillor Hancock. All those in favour? Very good. All right, thank you very much. You were. Who's against? None. Any abstain? Any? Oh, right. Thank you. There's something you didn't like.
So 7 for, 1 against.
Okay, you just. All right. Perhaps now we'll go back, since we just heard about it, to the minutes. Can we, Amelia, please?
Yes, that's fine.
What's chuckling in the background there? So I don't know if we should just leave it to you to update the minutes based on what we heard.
Yes.
Should we just do that?
Yeah, I just want you to, if you just agree with minutes with the suggestion, what Drew has said, what I've put. I don't know whether you're going to be happy with this.
Let's
I
hear
just
it.
put, once assurances are in place at Totnes Market, this would then be shared with the other markets.
Are you happy, Councillor Dennis, with that? Fantastic. Right. So with that, can we have approve the minutes? Is there a proposer, please, for the minutes? Councillor Hancock, seconder. Councillor Dennis, I think, was there. Right. All those in favour? Brilliant. Okay, thank you. All right. Right. Shared services methodology. Now we unfortunately did miss Appendix A in the original pack. We were sent that out as an email attachment. So over to our leader, Julian, if you wouldn't mind talking through this, please, if you haven't.
Yes, so what this report, we never used to get it, obviously we didn't because we weren't in shared services, but since we started sharing our services with West Devon, there were, at the time, and it sort of was born out when we were thinking there was a potential merger, and we were informed that if we didn't merge, West Devon would go to the wall. It didn't happen, but the merger didn't happen, and West Devon didn't go to the wall. But what concerns us South Hams was that in a way that we may be carrying West Devon. So this report was born of that, and it basically allays those fears that everything that has been done, who pays for what, is in an open and transparent way, and you can make your comments as you see fit on that. So that's a bit of the history as to where it came from. But it's a document. I think it's once a year it comes out. Yeah, once a year, and it just apportions what amount of money is spent by which council on which particular services. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Julian. Okay, I mean, this is again quite detailed and technical. I don't know if anyone's got any questions or whether we want to hear from the finance team. Councillor Rake.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make sure that I understand it, really. So there's a column headed allocation of South Hams District Council to West Devon Borough Council. Is that commutative? I mean, it sounds like we're giving them something, but it looks like a split between us, is question number one. Shall I allow Mrs. Buckle to reply first and then do my next question?
Yeah, I think that would be good because I think it's just perhaps the wording of the heading.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Ray. It is just a pure split between the two councils. So when you have a shared workforce, as we do with West Devon, obviously one of the biggest risks is that there's any cross-subsidisation of finances between the two councils. That cannot happen and must not happen. And one way of doing in the early days of shared services, we sat down with our external auditors who were Grant Thornton at the time to come up with a methodology about how we were going to split all of the staff salaries between both councils. Now, some councils ask every single member of staff to do a timesheet on a daily basis about where they've spent their time. We didn't, to my mind, that was very resource intensive. We didn't feel that either would be accurate. So what we came up with our external auditors was something called identifying cost drivers for each individual service about where the team was spending their time. So for example, for planning, we know how many planning applications has been done for each council. For planning enforcement, we know how many cases we have done for each council. We know how many calls have come through the call centre for each council. So that, to my mind, was a lot more efficient way and a lot more accurate way of allocating staff time. We do have a tolerance level, so when we look at these figures on an annual basis, if it's below a 3% tolerance, we don't adjust the figures. If it's above 3%, we do adjust. So we go through each individual service. I mean, some services we know are 50-50 or 60-40. Other services, for example, human resources, again, we know how many FTEs, how many pay slips we're doing on behalf of each council. So what we ask our external auditors to do as well is to re-perform the checks of the shared services staffing allocations. So the team will put these allocations through. We ask external audit to specifically look at this area and give each council the assurance that, in their opinion, the staff resources have been correctly allocated between and paid for by the two councils to ensure that there is no risk of cross-subsidisation between the two. So this is a very important report. It's something that we collect the data at the end of December every year. That then enables the team to put this report together, and it's always a report which comes to the March Audit and Governance Committee. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Answers question number 1.
Oh, right. How many are there?
And I
Okay,
think
keep
it
going.
answers question number 2 as well. So we'll move on to question number 3 without even asking question number 2. So the first column is just, so it's essentially the agreed split. So we take, for looking at the first line of the first column, we look at member services, and we and West Devon between us agree that the overall member services team will split it. We'll go Dutch on that one. And,
Yes,
right.
because in the main, we have the same number of committees, same number of meetings, and therefore a 50-50 split
Okay.
we feel is appropriate.
And then in the right-hand column, again, it's just perhaps just a slightly I'm misreading the title, the caseload information. So in the human resources line, for instance, I mean, by caseload there, we're not talking about actual cases, we're talking about employees.
Yes, that's right. Yes, number of staff.
So it sort of could be workload information, as it were, would be perhaps a better, I mean...
Yeah, I guess we've called it caseload because of the cost drivers implication about, for example, if you take if you take benefits, caseload is how many benefits claims have we processed for each council. It could be different, as you say, with HR, that actually relates to the number of persons employed. So in that respect, it's not a caseload, but it would be in terms of pay slips. So yeah, we can look at the wording on those columns.
Councillor.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, and when it comes to assets, we're talking, the figures are suddenly in millions of pounds. So it's a bit of a strange column, that one, but I think I understand it now. I like the use of the word hereditaments. Okay, I think for the time being, Chair, thank you very much. That's me.
Okay, good. Glad we were able to help you with that. Councillor Dennis.
Sorry, my naivety here. Is the population roughly the same? Oh, what? No, it's not. Okay.
So Southampton is over 80,000, whereas West Devon's more like 50,000. Yeah.
Okay. Oh. Any more? Oh, sorry, Councillor. Yeah, I didn't see you. Big pal.
That's right. Thank you. Most of my questions have already been answered, especially around the human resources. Is that, I mean, how have we got so many more employees than West Devon if we're providing very similar services? My other question was just on the waste side of things. There are 4 different breakdowns of ratio there. So how does that work there, please?
So the main reason South Hams has more employees is because we've got a direct labour force. So we've got, for example, a grounds maintenance team, we've got a building maintenance team, and we've got in-house waste services. Waste in West Devon is outsourced, so they haven't got employees on the direct payroll. Sorry, I've forgotten the second question, Councillor Oram.
Just on customer service and delivery, looking at waste, there are 4 different breakdowns,
yes.
4 different ratios.
Yeah.
So how does that work, please?
Yes, so within the waste team, there are different posts. For example, the head of waste has a different split to some of the staff which work within the waste team. So some of those staff are purely just doing South Hams work. For example, they may be working on South Hams collection of trade waste, for example. So we go through each individual team member and ask them and look at what work they're actually doing to assess their actual split. If they're in a sort of more managerial position, some of those are more split on a sort of 60-40 basis. So they're doing work for South Hams, but they're also doing work for West Devon. So it does depend in terms of the waste team exactly what work they're doing for both councils. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That's it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Buckle, for your answers on that. Very comprehensive. Okay, yes, please, Councillor Hancock.
Sorry.
Apologise for questions.
I'm just gonna poke at the inclusion of the numbers on the housing register as part of the caseload information, which has informed the shared services apportionment. So it's on doesn't have a page number on here. In housing, so numbers on the housing register, that's the number of individuals on the housing register. I'm not sure if that's the best way of measuring activity there, just because I spent a bit of time looking at the housing register and waiting list a little while ago, and there's a lot of dormancies on there, I suspect. So there's a lot of people sat on the waiting list not creating any work from this perspective. But there's a velocity of work on there. So there's a I forget the name of the
Devon Home Choice.
Thank you very much. The Devon Home Choice.
Devon Home Choice,
they have data on the number of times that individuals on the waiting list are applying for houses and those sorts of metrics, which would be a better metric in this instance of recording work generated for officers. If you see what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, we're very happy to look at different sort of cost drivers. I think in terms of the 60-40 split for housing, that is based on an average of different cost drivers, such as we know how many contacts we've had come into the housing team. For Southampton it was 452 and for West Devon it was 248. We know how many housing preventions we've done, how many direct lets we've got. So we've tried to take an average between those four sort of different cost drivers, and speaking to the team, they do feel that their time is split 60-40, but very happy to look at different cost drivers for the future on that.
Yeah, okay, maybe that can be taken as a separate email or discussion. Councillor Hancock, Councillor Rick.
Sorry, Chair, I don't want to monopolise things, but how dynamic is this document? I mean, do these proportions swing about wildly from year to year?
Not particularly. I mean, it depends on what happens during the year, which is why we've got the tolerance of 3%, because it would be hard to manage 1% here, 1% there. So I guess we take a pragmatic approach in that we have got a tolerance level, but we absolutely look back as well as forward to make sure that things are reflective of the position in the year. So, for example, last year would have been affected by waste coming back in-house. So it is absolutely a fluid document, and those percentages do change every year. I would say this year there are very few changes. I would say that's probably quite reasonable representation of a normal year, if you like, with the £41,000 overall being such a small percentage of the overall pay bill, if you like. But yeah, I don't know if that helps, Councillor Ray.
It helps enormously, thank you.
Okay, good. We seem like we've got some good answers there, thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, let's move to the recommendation that this committee notes the methodology for shared service apportionment of costs between Southampton and West Devon as attached, as provided in Appendix A. I'm happy to propose. Any seconder? Councillor Oram. Okay, all those in favour? Okay. Well, unanimous. Good, thank you. Right, excellent. Okay, we have not yet finished. Keep with us. Item 12, task and finish group updates, verbal updates. Okay, so I think what we're hearing from are the various leaders of the various task and finish groups that we've got ongoing. So my other notes here. Should we start with Yelm Community Energy? So, yeah, perhaps you'd like to comment on where we are with Yelm Community Energy. I think some people are aware, some are not. if you don't mind.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I received an email on the back of the original Task and Finish group where the request was to ask Guillaume Community Energy if there were any other funding options they would consider. The first one was just one single option. They've come back now with a proposal with 3 or 4 sort of options for the group to consider. I circulated it to the members of the Task and Finish group yesterday, I believe, with a view to convening another meeting in the light of that new information. I think that's the next step, Chair.
Yeah, okay, so we'll arrange a meeting. I think there's also a slightly different suggestion from the executive member, isn't there, which we perhaps need to think about if that's valid or not, from Councillor McKay. And it doesn't matter whether it is or not for the moment, but let's try and book a meeting in the next couple of weeks, if we can, to consider what's on the table. Councillor Dennis.
Thank you. I obviously happy with that as being on the original Task and Finish group there. I just think it might be really important for someone to be in the meeting that's actually advocating for the idea. I felt we were lacking anyone that was, you know, the proposer of the idea when we first met. So if we can invite either Young Community Energy or whether it is Councillor McKay, but we need someone to sell the idea to us, really.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. I mean, we surprisingly didn't have that in the meeting. I wonder if Councillor Brazil might want to comment on that, because in the first, just to sort of explain, in the first Task and Finish group, we didn't have anyone sort of really raising the proposal and supporting it. So is there someone that would like to help us on that in the second meeting, perhaps?
No, well, thank you for raising that. And I'm sorry to hear that, because it's a project that I think that we were very keen to explore. So was John wasn't there then at the Task and Finish?
He was, and he
wasn't. He didn't. He wasn't an advocate for the idea. Okay. No, well, I get that. I mean, look, I'll have a. Yeah, I'll have a word with John and say to him. I mean, he was very keen to push it. I mean, you know, if you feel that that it lacks enthusiasm and it's not something we would pursue, and John was there and didn't push that forward, then, you know, he will be the most disappointed of everyone if something doesn't materialise out of it. So I can certainly pass that message on.
Okay, thank you, Julian. Councillor Hancock, I think.
I think it was more that Councillor McKay just didn't have the information, that didn't have the answers to the questions that we were asking within the group, and so it was difficult for him to advocate for something that he didn't have all of the information on, which I think why Councillor Dennis is suggesting that somebody from Yelm Community Energy would be better placed to do that, so that when we raise questions about the proposal, then we can get good answers there and then.
Absolutely.
Councillor Oram?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's more just a case of we didn't have an opportunity to have some options. I don't want anyone to mislead the committee by saying that Councillor McKay was not interested in any way. It was more of there wasn't enough information or options for us to really be enthused about, you know, what we could do with that particular opportunity. But now that which is exactly why we asked Drew to draft that email, so that we can come back with something a little bit more concrete and have something to discuss, frankly. So now that we've got that, and with a little bit of direction from finance and whatnot, we'll be able to do a little bit more work on that, and I think we're all ready to go for that.
So then I get the sense from colleagues that it will be better to have Yelm Community Energy in the room for the second meeting. Is that what we're feeling? Because I think that would help clarify some points. And Councillor Dennis, you comfortable with that?
Yeah, and you know, I don't really think against Councillor McKay. I think he ended up agreeing with us all at the end of that meeting that, you know, why were we considering this particular option? So yes, I think yes, Young Community Energy, but also we've been asked to look at this by the executive and by Councillor McKay. So I do feel someone needs to sell the idea a bit more strongly to us.
Okay, Yeah, Mr. Powell.
Well, can I just make a suggestion that it might make sense for members to meet with the options in front of them, and if they then feel as though they want to pursue an option, possibly have a conversation with Community Energy at that point. I got the sense that with the information that's provided, which was the share offer, the background to the company, and the way it operated, was that members were feeling that it, maybe an investment that, do they need this investment from the council, was the sort of conclusion I got from the end of that meeting. So now there's other options. Maybe better to discuss that as members prior to consulting with Community Energy. Just a suggestion, Chair.
Yeah, okay. If you think that's the best way to go ahead, I do think we need to get to the bottom of the fifth suggestion. So we've already rejected one. We've now been given 3 other suggestions from Yelm, and we've got a fifth one from Councillor McKay. Is that fifth one also to be included in the mix or not? I think perhaps we could check with Yelm that fifth suggestion is valid before the meeting, so that we know what we're actually looking to consider. Would that make sense?
Yeah, I've forwarded that fifth suggestion to Lisa. She wasn't had a chance to look at it yet to see whether that's even an option. Okay. So I think we need to check whether that's something we can do as a local authority prior to going any further with it. That's okay, Chair. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. All right, good. That's hopefully a good verbal update. Thank you. All right, let's have a quick update then from St Anne's Chapel. Councillor Hancock, I think you had a good first meeting.
Yep. So we had.
You had a proposal there, did you? We had someone supporting the idea.
Well, it's already happened, so so we had a very productive first meeting with officers, which gave us a lot of information about the project at St Anne's. We have put our heads together and have sort of come up with a list of questions for additional information that we'd like. I think if I'm not misquoting colleagues, we're mindful that we don't want to take up inordinate amounts of officer time, so we'd be quite happy, I think, with the questions to be in written. We don't feel that we definitely need a second meeting if we've got that information. I mean, if that's not a misrepresentation, I'm looking around. Yeah. Yeah, so once we've got that information, we'll be able to meet as a group again to finalise what we would like to say and to draft a report.
Okay, good, and thanks very much to you and to the other members that are working on that project. Good stuff. Okay, the proposal on investigating the joint local plan, this is one that I was very keen on, and I've had a number of interesting discussions with officers about this, who all seem to think it's a very good idea and want us to start immediately, except that it's not really a job for audit and governance, and it might not be good timing either. So I think what we're going to do is defer it a little bit, and also see if we can form a joint group with Overview and Scrutiny to look at this one, so that it's sort of fits a bit better. But I think that's probably a good outcome. So, Councillor Nix, you're in the meeting. Do you want to add anything to what I've said?
No, I think we've discussed that, and there will be a plan going forward.
So probably we're going to start in the autumn, I think, more realistically. Councillor Oram?
Oh, actually, just to pick up what you just said there, Chair, I'm acutely aware that there's lots of task and finish groups going across both committees, and I wouldn't want to overwork Overview and Scrutiny more than they already are, doing fine work as it is. So if you're content to defer until the autumn, I think that would be sensible.
Okay, thank you. All right. I think there are some other potential ideas that people might have raised, or concerns where this committee might want to dig into some detail. Does anyone want to raise anything at this point? Okay. All right, so then let's move on to the next item. We've had, oh yeah, if you might want to add, Amelia, the joint local plan investigation, just to, I mean, we haven't got a motion. Let's go on to the next item then, which I do think we've left the best for the end, or it's not quite the end actually. The budget book 2024-25. I think is the leader going to present this one? No, perhaps not. From the look of his face, is the finance team going to?
Sorry, my apologies. I thought it was on you were onto the work.
Oh no,
programme.
no. We're on to the exciting. Not there yet. But the budget book, where we're going to spend our money, Councillor Brazil.
Well, absolutely. So this is what we've agreed to in the budget. We agreed at our February meeting, and this is the detailed facts and figures within that. Obviously, what we'll get back in this time next year is we'll get. It's always behind. We'll get the audited accounts as to how well we stuck to that budget. But I think it's really just to note because the debate around what and where monies are spent has already been had at the budget meeting back in February. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Brazil. I mean, I don't know, Mrs. Buckle, if you want to just explain what this report is telling us, or any points to note that we might want to look at in detail.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So in terms of the budget book, this is something that we bring to the March Audit and Governance Committee every year, and it's so that the team can upload these budgets into the finance system ready for 1st of April and the new financial year. We have colour coded it to draw your eye really to the middle column that says 24-25 medium term financial strategy adjustments. So this is where within the budget process members have approved to either add more cost pressures into individual service lines. So that may be for things like, for example, there was some pay inflation within the budget. There was some cost pressures where, for example, we're putting extra money into insurance. And then also it also works out contributions to and from earmarked reserves, and also the income targets as well. So if members have approved increasing the income targets, for example, investment income, we know we are getting more treasury management income. So members approved to increase that budget as part of the 24-25 budget process. So the income target for next year will be 1.6 million, an increase of 800,000 on the current base budget of 800,000. So we've gone through line by line. All of these cost centres have a member of staff who are responsible for managing that budget. So that may be a head of service, that may be an individual budget manager. Those are shown within the sheets as well. And also for this year, obviously there are some additional budgets for the council plan, for example, community development, climate change and biodiversity, good quality core services. So anywhere where additional money has been put into the budget for next year, that will show in this report as well, Chairman. And we've put the appendices as part of Appendix B that shows all of those changes so that you can reconcile between the two individual documents. West Devon's got exactly the same budget book and coding. So if a manager is managing budgets across both councils, which they will be, on the left-hand side, it's exactly the same code, prefixed with an S for South Hams and a W for West Devon. So that's how budget managers manage their individual budgets within each individual council. But the coding is aligned. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. I think although I accept that the budget has been approved and I'm not trying to change the budget, I think what this is showing that we maybe couldn't see quite so clearly before is the individual line items and the changes from previous year. And actually it's quite illuminating in that front. There are a few line items of quite a large spend where the increase is fairly significant. So I just want to ask maybe the leader if you're happy with the changes, say, in waste services going up 17%. I'm not quite sure that that's been discussed in much detail, is it? And there are some other examples as well. How should we be sort of reviewing some of those things and changes from last year?
Well, I think on, say, let's take waste, for example. I think that's where, and I've talked about variations in our budget monitoring, and I think that's a very useful exercise in seeing where these extra costs come from. And what we found with waste, due to inflation, inflationary pressures and increases in wages, the lack of revenue in respect of recyclate, and such like, that it's an expensive business and it has increased more than we would expect. What I would say is that we've taken all that into account and we've set our budget, and you're right, it has changed and it has gone up a lot. What will be interesting to see is how those, because some of them are, they're not guesses, they are best estimates given the world that we're in, and we'll see how we stick with that. If, for example, there is suddenly a big increase in the price that we can get for some of the recyclables, then we will see that actually we make a surplus in that area. But then on the other hand, if that drops, then we will see again how we would be a loss. I mean, Lisa and her team have to, given all the ramifications and the changes that happened during the year before, have to decide how much they think this service is going to cost us in this coming year. Now, I think it's absolutely right to note that there is a big increase, but again, you're right. We can't change the budget. We can ask questions about it, but we can't change the budget as it is at the moment. And maybe it's something that when you come to the budget process, you will see within that budget process that there are budget pressures on particular services. And this was an example where we knew there was going to be more expenditure, so we had to put that into the core budget. We have to make savings in other areas, and sometimes we incorporate, I think as Jed has mentioned on a couple of occasions, about how we got more car parking income than we thought. So that goes into the core budget and they balance each other out. And that's how we formulate the budget in the end. So what I think is it's a useful lesson in seeing how all the pieces of the jigsaw fit together. So throughout the year, we'll have the budget monitoring. Then we will have the budget setting process. And within that budget setting process, you will see the cost pressures. Lisa and her team will put forward what the cost pressures are in particular services, and that's how we come up with the final budget. And then hopefully, again, as this year, as last financial year, we will see a budget that is a balanced budget and comes out with a small surplus, which is exactly what we wanted to do, and we've achieved that. I mean, the rider in that and the caveat also is that if on occasions there are extraordinary expenditure that are materialised during the year, we will probably pull money out of reserves in order to cover that. I hope that goes some way into explaining it.
Yeah, thank you, Julian. Yeah, Councillor Nix.
Yeah, it sort of follows on from what Councillor Brazil's just said. But how do we make a decision about if we do have to take from reserve, which reserve we take from?
That would generally be a report back to the executive, and there would be a recommendation around that. So it depends what it is, really. Some services have their own specific earmark reserve. For example, if it was a maintenance issue, we do have a maintenance and repairs earmark reserve, so we'd recommend it came from that. If it was something to do with waste, we would recommend it comes from the waste reserve. So it very much depends what that variation is. In terms of the waste cost pressures, yes, although there were cost pressures of 852,000 for waste, as the leader has said, 278,000 of that was because of moving to the Devon Line service. So there was a council report in July 23 around that. 90,000 of it was because we've got additional properties. So with additional properties, we need to put on additional rounds. And we did assume a 5% inflation provision within the waste service. And of course, because we've got a direct labour force, when there is pay inflation, which there was, that impacts on the service as well. So there was another 287,000 for pay inflation as well. So although there was an increase in the costs, some of that was one-off because it was related to a service change. Some of that was because of things like additional properties. Another was just general inflation. Obviously, inflation's starting to come down now, so that's good news. But yeah, we tend to, when we put the budget together, we tend to separate these between individual lines so that members can see exactly what cost relates to what item. And then in the budget bit, we sort of put it all together to on individual lines. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Are there any more points or other comments or questions about the budget book? No? Okay, good. Let's move then to the recommendation that the Audit and Governance Committee notes the content of the budget book. I'm happy to propose. Any seconder? Councillor Oram, very fast. All in favour? Oh my goodness. Okay, thank you. Good, right. Let's have a quick look then at the committee work plan and see what there is. Maybe Mrs. Buckle, you could just quickly take us through this, because I think we, just to preface this, we did ask that we have more meetings. I think that was proven to be difficult. More meetings so that we wouldn't have such long meetings, remember? Yeah, well, we were refused more meetings, so we've got long meetings. Just keep up. Right, let's have a quick look at the work plan and try not to do too much each time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So obviously our next meeting is scheduled for the afternoon of the 18th of July. We will have our draft annual accounts for 23-24 and the annual governance statement. We'll also have some of our regular reports. We'll have the end of year report for Treasury Management, annual report for Devon Audit Partnership Internal Audit, Strategic Risk Register, fraud risk assessment and annual fraud report I've put on for July as well, as well as a report from the monitoring officer. That will be an annual standards report. And on each individual meeting, I have put audit and governance task and finish group updates. I think by the time we get to, we've put 17th of October as being the date of the second meeting, but if we were to meet the statutory deadline for audited accounts, that is actually the end of September. So I think we keep the 17th of October date in there, but if there's any chance of meeting that 30th of September, we would come to the committee and ask if there's any chance we could bring the date forward. So I've put they're all brought forward to the end of September, depending on how the external audit's going. So obviously, I've got their Bishop Fleming audit opinion on the accounts, value for money assessment. We always bring a report every year on investment properties as well. So we'd look to bring that in October. And then going forward into December and March. I think today's agenda is long because normally we wouldn't have the accounts on a March committee. Normally those would have been done September, October or November, but because the audit's been pushed back, it has made this committee agenda longer than normal, I would say. So apologies for that, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Buckle. Are there any comments on this? I think it's probably unavoidable to sort of go through this these list of reports in the time that's been proposed. So unless someone can sort of suggest that we don't want to look at some things, I expect we don't have a lot of choice. Councillor Dennis.
Well, I'm just highlighting that all the meetings from now on will be so much easier because it'll be the second time we've looked at everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll know what questions to ask without floundering around, and the answers.
Good point.
And the answers will be quick. Councillor. Councillor Rake's got an alternative view.
Well, just that I'm surprised to hear that from Councillor Dennis, because I know, that, like many of us, that she does her homework, and normally the meeting is already the second time that we've looked at things, if not the third.
Yeah, very good. Okay, well let's move on then. I don't think we've got anything to cover. Any other points? All right, so let's close the meeting. Thanks very much for your time. Councillor Orham's got something to add.
I just thought I would take the opportunity to say to Mr. Murray to thank you for your work, and this is going to be the last time we're going to see you now, so the best for the future. And we welcome our new external auditor and our new internal auditor. How are you feeling now? Are you going to leave in June or? Okay. Give me the next meeting. All right. To be reviewed then, Chair. Thank you very much.
Yeah, very good point.